Hi, everyone, and welcome to an impromptu episode. I have my friend Alison back.
Hey, everybody.
um, yeah, man. We follow each other on social media, so I've just been enamored, with all the stuff that you've been sharing. So anyway, for the listening audience, I think most of my viewers are used to you now, Alison. You've been here like 4 times. If you're new here, Alison is amazing. She is an independent researcher, a hell of a researcher at that. And I feel like, what we talk about all the time, most people that have talked to me say they have to watch it more than once. So I feel like tonight is going to be one of those nights. So I'm going to encourage people, number one, make sure you like and share the video. That way we can beat YouTube's algorithms, because YouTube shadow bans these kinds of talks. So to beat YouTube's algorithms, and we want to get more people in, be sure to like and share it. Share it out with your network, because we're going to be talking about some pretty interesting stuff tonight. And I always invite Alison here because I am interested in it, and I'm interested in learning more about it. I have no clue what the Internet of Bio things is. That's why Alison is here, right? So I'm learning along with each of you. So Alison, what's up?
Hey, well, I'm thank you. It's always so fun to hang out on a Friday night. And I just want to say, as far as independent researcher, I sort of am the person who channels a lot of information from other people. So I just want to put out that a lot of the information that, like, I'm the person who's maybe in a position to sit in front of a camera and try to explain it to other people.
Right.
But I don't want to say that I'm the sole, like, 'cause there's a lot of, it's sort of a collective of people who are we're all throwing things at each other and like collaborating. Yep. So I think, to me, that's the way I see it, is almost like there's this big puzzle, right? And some of us are working on the edge pieces, and some of us are putting different pieces together. So I come in that spirit. And just for people who may not know, like, both Zakiya and I came sort of into our activism through the school, the education system, and advocating for kids. And so I know, like, in my public presence, sometimes I take a pretty hard line on things, but it's because a lot of the technological systems and things that I'd seen were used in very predatory ways in the Philadelphia public schools, which were sort of this crucible of really harmful systems that really were treating children like data modules. And at the time, my evolution, like my consciousness, as I've gotten more and more information, it continues to evolve. And then what I've realized is that beyond a certain level of surveillance of these devices, of digital technologies in schools that are targeted at kids, and then even beyond, we talked before about financial markets, not only in selling the technologies and the cloud computing and all the things, but creating literal gambling games like that are going to play out on betting on children's futures, betting on their future behavior. That what I'm going to talk about tonight a little bit is what's called the Internet of Bio-Nano things, which builds on some stuff we talked about before, which was talking about the Internet of Things, which is the idea of having like sensor networks that are overlaid both in your house, on your body, in the outside environment, in smart cities. And it's all of this stuff, they're very strategic in how they pitch it, because for the most part, it is sold as only something that's good, that's progress, that's innovative, but it's not really sold within the context of empire or colonialism or these other elements, which I think your audience can resonate with, because I think that's really the lens that I try to bring, is to say, oh, sorry, there's sirens outside.
Yeah.
City life, right?
City life, anyway, right.
Yeah. So, that's the lens I bring, is that these technologies are fundamentally military. They were birthed out of the military, have always been. And in this moment, regular folks, like, the masses are not in control of these technologies. These technologies are held in the hands of the most powerful interests, global, at this point. And so we need to keep that in mind when they're selling people on, like, closing the digital divide and these different things. Like, I was pretty aware of the idea of, Chromebooks and tablets, and even to the point of like smart headbands, putting wearable technologies on kids, putting Fitbits on kids.
Yeah.
The nanotech was a whole new area for me. And I've really been working on it the past, maybe not that long, 6 to 8 weeks or so, but it's really come on the scene to understand that the nano level, which is really being built into biomedical, biocomputing, biotechnology spaces, which are a huge growth area around the world. It's molecular assembly of electronics embedded into everything, including our bodies, and you can't see them except with an electron microscope, which is kind of also like viruses. So you can't even, it's like having an invisible weapon out there. Only it's sold to you.
That's definitely military technology.
And you don't realize it's actually a weapon and how it's being used. And for the most part,
even like Fitbit. So I've been thinking about a lot about this now, Alison, that you told me that, because most people that I know, including myself, I have a smartphone. I do not have an iPhone. I have the Samsung Galaxy. I have 2 phones. Okay. And I exercise, and you made me think about this. I'm like, shit, is this a part of it too? Because Samsung has an app called Samsung Health. Because when you were talking about like the biosensors, I was like, damn, that must be what that is. Because when I'm out exercising, I walk and I jog in my neighborhood. It counts my steps, and I can set it to like how many steps I want to do a day, and it counts it for me. And it's like, yay, you did it. I thought about you.
Wait till they put graphite in your shoes, Takia. They're going to be powering the blockchain.
Oh my God. I was like, something so innocent, because I mean, like me, I feel like that's so harmful. Like, yeah, I want help counting. You know what I mean? Like, I can see how people will think like something like that's harmless, right? You think it's harmless because you don't know. Like, I have no idea what they're doing with this data. You made me think about it. Yeah. I'm just thinking, it's me, it's my name, it's my email. I didn't even dream to think about, because they ask you your weight, like they ask you all this stuff.
I think you can't delete them off the phone either. If you like apps you can take off, I don't think you can take the health apps off your phone.
I've never tried.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because actually I, like a number of years back when I was doing Focus on Education, I had a friend who was in the greater Seattle area. I think it wasn't right in downtown Seattle, but nearby. And Google had taken over the park, the municipal park, and fixed it up, because it's all these public-private partnerships. And so they were having a summer program, and this was about 3 years ago, where kids would go do STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math activities in the park with a phone. And so it was like an interactive, I don't know if it was QR codes or sensor technologies that were activated on a device. And then the idea was that the kids would do this contest and learn STEM activities in the park with a phone. And then they would be entered to win money for their school. And so that's how it was pitched, was like, go to the park with your phone, do education, whatever that is. And like, I knew at the time that the education that was going to be delivered were these Pokemon Go kind of badges. And that's the conditioning. Get out and exercise. But what they were saying is, like, even in the phone, that they were also capturing health data on the kids. And so these things are layered in when you start to give away your public. It's like the full-on enclosures of public space, municipal space to these partnerships that like might make your park look nicer, but then you're in a, it's part of this open air digital prison that might seem enjoyable to a point until you decide you don't like it anymore. So
it seems to me that, I wanted to share this with you actually, because I don't know if you saw that I shared it on my Facebook page, but the only Black organization in this country that has warned people sort of like about the vaccine, and I'm making a point with this, and has explicitly told Black people specifically not to take the vaccine, is the NOI, or the Nation of Islam. And so there are some attorneys that are affiliated with the organization in Texas, and they did this really thorough Facebook Live explaining people's rights around like the mandatory the vaccines and like what things that they can do. And I didn't realize because they also invited, there was this other guy who was a lawyer, white lawyer. He's actually litigating several of the cases that have popped up around the private employers requiring the vaccines, even though they're like experimental still, like they're not even approved by the FDA and all of that. He brought up the fact that there's actually a federal law around informed consent that's never been tested. So I feel like, you know, all of this stuff will eventually like make its way through the courts. And like this stuff that you and I are getting ready to talk about is going to have some implications on that, because if these people are collecting that kind of data and they're doing stuff with it and they're not telling people, you know, explicitly, like your data, like we're making money off of it, like your data is going to be used against you, like if you don't.
But
you know what I mean?
They want to give you a blockchain identity, Zakia. They're going to get you all set up safe and sound with your own. Then you can sell your data and be a good data capitalist.
Oh my God!
If you're well behaved.
You know, that's really nuts. So I can imagine that I'm thinking about groups like that, and I'm also thinking about like libertarians. Like I can imagine that there's going to be a section in this country that's not going to be okay with all this shit.
Well, see, and I think part of what I bring to it as being from Philadelphia and my journey of learning about like systems of power and domination and myths is that there's this sense that somehow like we have a constitution that will protect us. But that's why the frame I keep using is like, look at what happened to the original people of Trudell Island, like, as well as enslaved people. Like that stuff was never meant for certain groups of people based on the economic paradigm. And the new economic paradigm is that all of natural life is meant to be consumed by synthetic technology to make the new model, which is a biodigital convergence. And so there's no inherent protection in that, because in reality, like the Bill of Rights was set aside. And so in order to access the Bill of Rights and to stand for those rights that you're given, which are still like, they're not affirmative rights, you know, even so, you have to have the resources to take something to the Supreme Court, which is something very few people actually have. So on paper, it looks great. But in reality, at every level, it's stacked against regular folks, against systems of power. So like you can spin your wheels a whole long time going through the court systems. And I don't mean to be, but that's why for me, it feels like it's much like it's a spiritual engagement. It's like this because I think once we realize it's been compromised from these earliest origins of how we understand what the United States is, your strategies become different, right? And so I don't know. I'm not trying to downplay people who want to take that route, but even, I live just down the block from Girard College, which was the site of one of the largest civil rights struggles in the North, and the integration of that school. And for years they litigated, and it wasn't until Cecil B. Moore, who was an Marine, joined with the youth, like the hood kind of kids, and they occupied that school, the wall. They walked it for like almost a year. And it was their physical presence under Frank Rizzo, who with the brutal police presence.
It was terrible, yeah.
Yeah, like, so it was this combination. Like, if it had just been like winding its way through the courts, it never would have happened. But this like non-violent.
I completely agree.
It was kind of both. So
it's gonna take. Listen, I'm with you, because the courts. I mean, listen, I'm an African American, so I know the courts have ruled plenty of times. They said that we were, there's a quote from one of the Supreme Court justices that ruled in Dred Scott that said that we had no rights that a white man had to ever respect. So I get it, but I feel like, and maybe, my history may not even be right on this, but I feel like this new thing is including everybody. It's not like certain groups.
See, I mean, it is the potential to actually unify, but so that's like one of the reasons I really, I feel like I'm an outlier among the outliers of this. All right. But I keep plugging away. And like I would say on Twitter, like every couple of days, I get like another 100 people. So, and it's all kinds of people, because really what I'm giving people is primary source information and saying, this is what I'm seeing. Like, what do you think? Because it's not partisan, because everybody's in on it. Every country, every political group.
It's
like
so
it's
true.
Power versus everybody else. And so having some clarity around what is actually happening, because we are in an information warfare scenario and people are confused. And I don't know how many people, like, we are in a tremendous state of confusion even within the resistance. And so I would say I've been coming to terms more or less over the past, 18 months around like the terrain theory, germ theory. And then the more I learn about nanotechnology, the more I'm convinced that actually what is underway is a weaponization of the environment through these invisible militarized systems that are, and frequency weapons that are both hampering our ability to have any discernment and then also to help come up with good strategies. Because ultimately, if what we're advancing in the past week has been like surfacing this gain of function research, end, like that's a huge thing. So now everybody's talking about that again.
Everybody's talking about it.
So what I'm saying is like they're talking about it for a reason. It's more confusion because this is my frame. The way I look at it is that what we are engaged with is an invisible combatant. Okay. And so either that invisible combatant is a virus or that invisible combatant is nanotechnology.
Military.
And so, and they're both only visible under electron microscopes. But if we go the gain of function route, then essentially what that is doing is advancing a future where you will say, well, this isn't that bad. This is just the flu. Look at all of the numbers, but it still allows for rule by electron microscope. And if we say, no, it isn't that, it is this other new form of weapon that is actually going to change life under this fourth industrial revolution complex, this synthetic biology transhumanist paradigm. And it's not just one country versus another country, or that it literally is a very small group of people who know what's going on against everyone else. If you get to that place of clarity, I would say like 85% of the content that's out there, you kind of just, it's secondary. It's just, you push it to the side and then focus. And then if others feel strongly, and I would say the presentation I'm giving tonight, it's a bit put together quickly because I actually did about 3 interviews with my friend Jason. He's at August Fest YouTube channel that was, again, based on a talk I gave in person in upstate New York about 3 weeks ago. So that one didn't really get well reported. Yeah,
you're traveling a lot too.
Literally, I have 9.5 hours of content on this. And then every day, like my friend, and I will highly recommend her work.
I'm going to go back and watch that. So everybody, it's ArgFest. How do I?
Argus.
I'm subscribed.
ARGUSFEST. Argus Fest YouTube.
Yeah. So everybody, if you're not checking out,
9 hours.
Listen, I told you I'm out walking in my neighborhood, so I oftentimes listen to you or some other podcast that I'm listening to. So I want to encourage people to go and check out those 9 hours that Jason. I mean, there's like 3 different videos though, right? It's not 9 straight hours
like
on
3-hour videos.
It's 3-hour videos. Yeah, my husband was teasing me tonight. Teasing me tonight. He said, "Oh yeah, let's get back as you and Alison will be on for 3 hours tonight." I said, "I don't think she wants to do 3 hours tonight. She had a long day at work."
But
anyway,
this is still like, so this is an encapsulation of this. But what I'm saying is like the more I spend time with it, like they have literally developed what they call dual use weapon systems to influence how your brain and cells function remotely through waveforms, both like acoustics, lighting, magnetism. Like you wouldn't imagine all of the things that they've been going
I can't imagine because I don't even think like that, like to be able to harm people through all this shit.
Right. And so like in the past 3 weeks or so, the past month, La Quinta Columna has been actually doing the microscopy work around graphene. Now I know, which is one of these nanoparticles, these engineered particles.
That was going to say, tell people, graphene.
So they're a group of Spanish scientists. I know, like, there's been some other sort of social, alt media personalities who are throwing that into question. It's possible that in some respect, I haven't really listened to those, that some of those individuals may be compromised or set up to like take that issue off stage. But I would encourage, all you have to do is actually do an online search for graphene. It's PHGRAPHENE, and adjuvant, ADJUVANT, which is goes along with the injections. And there's hundreds of papers, so no one can dispute that, like going through and looking at the role that graphene is playing. And it's not the only nanoparticle. There are many other engineered nanoparticles, but this is a particularly important one for the creation of nanomachines, is a really big deal. And so at this point, I would question anyone who is attempting to push that to the side and push another narrative, a narrative around gain of function, or even, I would say, some other confusing narratives are the fact that, you know, everyone's going to die, right? Everyone who took an injection and is going to die in 3 to 5 years. That's keeping people in a really negative, bad place. And ultimately, I think the plan for what I will lay out with nanoelectronics is they actually need living beings to mine for data and to run the metaverse as battery systems. So,
Lord have mercy. Now, what's the metaverse?
So the metaverse is like the 2-dimensional virtual reality world. Like it's a world of like all sorts of particle computing systems. And so they actually need it. That doesn't sound fun. No, well, I mean, they're going to make it sound fun to the kids. They'll make it sound like a video game like Minecraft, but you know, they won't tell you it's run by the CIA.
Oh, my other son loves Minecraft.
I know, he'll be right at home in the metaverse. Actually, I got called a blockchain witch hunter yesterday, chasing demons on the internet. Yeah, by this guy. And I was trying to warn him because he just got this Rockfin channel. And I'm like, man, you know, this blockchain stuff, it's the portal to the metaverse, and like, it's not good, and it's digital twins. And he's like, he got really, really angry with me. And I was like, this makes no sense. I didn't say anything mean. And then it turns out like he's been a 20-year video game and augmented reality programmer. So he knew exactly what I was talking about, you know, when I looked up his LinkedIn. Like he knew exactly.
Oh, I saw that. I did see that. Yeah. So you be researching the hell out of these people. I don't know why they mess with you.
I'm not doxing people. Literally, I just look up their LinkedIn, which is like, you put out a LinkedIn. That's pretty easy. But I'm like, what is this? Like, who's coming out of the woodwork to call me a witch hunter? This is really strange. But like, yeah, I suppose if you're building the metaverse, you don't really want people to be questioning it. And that's sort of where I'm at. Like, I always blunder into these things. I don't know, maybe I am a demon hunter on the internet, but like not intentionally.
Yeah. I'm so happy you all are here. We have such a good turnout for a Friday night. You all are really want this information. Thank you so much, all of you who are here. And then they're active in the chat. People are like, is it the Matrix?
We have some people.
Like, is this the Matrix? What is it? Thank you all. Make sure, again, we want to beat YouTube's algorithm. So hit the thumbs up button and share this. We want to get this information to as many people as possible. But anyway, you're not going to hear from me tonight. Go ahead, Alison.
Yeah.
You got the floor.
So, I mean, anyway, that's sort of the thing. I mean, I think I want to dispel a couple things. And again, you don't have to believe me. I'm not selling you anything. And my analysis continues to evolve. I didn't really have any good grasp on nanoelectronics 2 months ago, right? So maybe in 2 more months, there'll be a whole nother piece of the puzzle that will throw everything into a highlight. But if, you know, we've talked about the technologies, the blockchain, the virtual reality in education, the children in Ethiopia going on blockchain, feeding their thoughts into the humanoid robots. Like, we've already gone there, right? So now this next level is essentially 20 years of research into nanoelectronics to get past your blood-brain barrier, literally into your brain with electronic systems to track the neurons and change how your brain functions. So that's like this whole other level, which I go into in great detail with Jason. I don't know, I'll hit all of it tonight.
I have a quick question, because this blood-brain barrier that you just laid out. So I watched again, there was a video again last night by Dr. Wesley Muhammad, and he talked about, and listen, people, I'm not telling you whether or not to take the shot. You do what you want. Your body is your autonomy. But I'm asking Alison this question to get clarity. So I don't want people to get upset about this. But he was, because people do have views on this, on what this shot is about. He said that there is some technology in the actual shot that deals with the blood-brain barrier. And when you said that, that triggered the thought, because I have to be honest. And again, if people get upset with this, that's fine. You can not watch. But as an African American person who we know our history in this country of having our bodies experimented on, from enslavement all the way into the 2000s. Let's just be honest. Like, these pharmaceutical companies are still being sued every damn day for some shit that they've done to Native Americans, Black folks, and everybody now. Hell, but the thing of it is that African Americans have been fighting a fight around reparations. We've been fighting a fight around making sure that we have the necessary resources in our community so that we can deal with gun violence in a way that's more holistic, instead of just locking all of our people up into prisons and creating the prison industrial complex. And then we've also been fighting around issues around like universal health care, all of that. And so now all of a sudden, you all want to give us a free shot, and you want to go knock door to door. You want to come to our churches. You want to, it's good for you. I'm sorry. That's just my thinking. I don't trust you. Y'all want to give me some shit for free, but you don't want to give me the shit that I've been asking for? No, thanks. So anyway, that was my question. Is it connected? Do you think it's connected at all? Because if they're pushing this shot like literally to everybody, like they're marketing heavily to African Americans, but they're pushing it to everybody. So everybody, like you said, is going to be caught up into this metaverse because they need everybody's bodies.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And so, I mean, and I'm not to discount the fact that there are likely going to be, I mean, we're in an experiment, right? This is an experimental process. And
thank you.
So if you understand this as an experiment to figure out how to administer nanotechnology in a way, because part of it is the dosing that is connected to the size and quantity of the particles. And so we know there's very robust software setups created to both track the vials and track the dosing, and AI to track, the harms. Mm-hmm. And so if you were to understand that as a grand experiment to figure out, both based on someone's race, someone's geography, someone's age, someone's health status, how to appropriately dose this nanoparticle structures without killing them, like that's what they most want. And what has been happening for at least a decade is they've been doing a lot of work on mice and rats in optogenetics and doing all of the brain mapping. And I've been in touch with people who are victims of cyber torture, where they're actually being remotely harmed with nanoparticles as well. So I think it's already jumped out from the mouse, like the rodent trials, into people, but now they need to scale it. And so I think what is happening is that is happening with the tracking for injections. But then the other piece is, and I don't want to just limit it to graphene, because graphene is really important because it's the first two-dimensional material, although I think they're building other two-dimensional materials, and they're used for the machines. But there are many other engineered nanoparticles. And I will say at this point, I really encourage, if people haven't had a chance to follow my friend. She blogs under the name Steffers, STEPHERS, at A Piece of Mindful. And it's a piece like a puzzle piece. So A Piece of Mindful blog, it's a collection of several people blogging. They blog under Steffers, and they have quite a bit of very, very detailed information about nanotechnology. And a lot of my information is, we collaborate quite closely. So it's being dosed in the environment. If you put graphene, again, and I'm not saying that's it's exclusively graphene, but for an example, they're saying it's the wonder material. In almost any word, graphene's in watermelon, graphene's in condoms, graphene's in diapers, graphene's in tennis rackets, graphene's in everything. And so this is the other point of clarity, is that I think within the resistance community, people are so frustrated and tired at this point that they're starting to wish bad things on the other side, just as the other side was wishing bad things on the people who are resisting, which serves their ultimate the interests of power. To have people pitted
keeping us confused and divided.
Right. And so what I'm saying is, based on my assessment, like in collaboration with my friend who's done a lot of research, and I've done research, is if the goal is ultimately to figure out how to transform us into this centaur, this human-computer interface, they're going to do it through the environment as well as through medical intervention. And so those of us who are choosing not to be part of a direct medical intervention are still being exposed to it through our environment, which again is something that the Black community is very familiar with in terms of environmental racism and exposure to harmful chemicals, harmful air pollution, like disproportionate, like toxic environments and communities that have been redlined and that sort of thing. So, you know, that shouldn't be any surprise, but I'm saying my goal is to bring people together and say, guess what? if my lens is correct, on the one hand, it's not good for any of us, but on the other hand, if it is nanotechnology and frequency, there must be some way of counteracting the harm, right? Counteracting the frequency, detoxing from the particulates, deactivating them. We don't want streets full of bodies. I don't think anybody would feel good about that outcome. Now, I'm not diminishing the harm that has happened to people as a result. And I think that is part of their calculus. And in some ways, I think people who suffer neurological damage then become another test bed for nanoelectronic solutions, right? So they further create more problems. So then they can experiment. They can get another, opportunity to say, oh, now you're having seizures. Now you're having paralysis. Well, here, let us try out these new nanorobotics on you. It's going to be precision medicine. It'll be really wonderful. And so there's many layers to this, but I think what I'm trying to say is I think we need to have some clarity about the nanotech, that it's about biocompatibility, and that there should be ways for us to collectively figure out how to reduce the harm that is being done. So anyway, so maybe I'll start with my slides. Can you do that, or do I do that?
No, you do it. You can do it.
Let me see. Share video. It says video file. How do I get in there? Oh.
Yeah, you controlled them before.
All right.
It's been a while since you and I have been together.
I know. I don't know. So now it's at the bottom. So I don't know why. Maybe I'll just stop the screen. I'll share it again. Let me see. Share screen.
Yeah, no problem.
Chrome tab. Okay, so here we go. So this is just a short clip. Again, I think my frame on what is happening, it's about systems of domination. And that goes back to the original sins, of the country around the theft of indigenous land and erasure, as well as enslavement. So John Trudell, I believe, he passed in 2015, but that he was very much a voice that speaks to these times. So I just have a short clip here where he's talking about civilization being the big lie and needing clarity.
It's like there's this predator energy on this planet. And this predator energy feeds upon the essence of the spirit, feeds upon the essence of the human being, the spirit. Now, this predator energy can take fossil fuel and other resources out of the earth, turn it into fuel to run a machine system. But in order for there to be a need for that system, and in order for that system to work, they have to mine our minds to get at the essence of our spirit. And the same way the external mining takes place, it pollutes. We see now, people understand how it poisons the environment, the water, the air, pollution. The mining of the essence, the mining of the spirit, mining our minds, the pollution from that is all of the neurotic, distorted, insecure behavior patterns that we develop. That's the pollution. Because in order for this predatory system, this disease to work, we must not be able to use our minds in a clear, coherent manner. Because if we use our minds in a clear, coherent manner, we will not accept the unacceptable.
So that was so great to ground this conversation.
Sorry. I'm out of practice.
No, it's fine.
So
no, that was great.
I mean, and I just want to remind is that his John Trudell was a leader of the American Indian movement, and he and his wife was actually killed in a suspicious house fire with her. She was pregnant with their third child and their two children and her mother. And it was very likely arson. And it was after he had burned a flag at the FBI building in Washington. So, and she had done a lot of work around preserving and protecting the water and her culture in Idaho, which is where she was from, Tina Manning Trudell. So, the history I think is really important, and we have to just have some clarity around, clarity in our minds about what is actually happening. And so that's I'm trying to get clear with how I think things are. I'm not saying that I'm the ultimate arbiter of truth, and we're all on a journey of figuring it out, but that's sort of where I'm at the moment. Oh, well, sorry.
It's like there's this predatory energy on this planet.
Sorry. I guess it goes this way. Okay.
It's like there's this.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. So as I had said before, I think what we are definitely in is an information war. It's a war of information, and actually the universe is made out of information. And so this is a Defense Department document from 2003 where they were talking about that the Defense Department had generally been a reactive force, but that they needed to really work on psychological operations and to really have maximum effect of psychological operations. And so I think most of us would see that and think that would be things like, media, propaganda, print material, visual material, television, celebrities. But I think increasingly in this information war, and you'll see when we talk about nanotechnology, that was really getting underway in the early 1990s. And so this was about 10 years in the push for nanotechnology and the push to understand how that technology could be used in the body to actually understand brain and mind function. So, that's really important, because I would say most people, if you frame something as understanding a psychological operation, would think that was something that was coming, that wasn't necessarily directly affecting possibly how your neurons work, that it was something from the outside in as opposed to the inside out, right? And I think we are moving increasingly with nanotechnology to the inside out part. And so one of the things I talk a lot about Stephen Newcomb's book, Pagans in the Promised Land, and how at the time that the invaders were coming, to North America, the original people on the shores, they see these ships coming in and they can't really imagine what's in the head of the people on the ships. And so there was really no common understanding to even get to until much later, to understand that their intent was erasure of the people who were already there and the culture that was already there, and substantial changes to the environmental systems and the other beings that were already on the continent. And so I feel like we're in this moment now with the invaders are coming in, only this time they're the biotechnologists and the electrical engineers and the data analysts. And so the weapons that are being arrayed against us and that we are being confused by so that we cannot see clearly, we do not have clarity, is that it's about blockchain technology turning us into a data set with a digital identity. It's about transforming our world into smart systems with sensors, which is a spatial web that's a game that's being run by the CIA. It's using these nanoelectronics to control us as players in the game that is being set up, and to get feedback loops, because a lot of this is connected to cybernetics. And then it's using different electromagnetic frequencies through the electronics to manage us within this gamified world that is increasingly being managed at a molecular level, something that we cannot even access if we do not have an electron microscope. And so I sort of frame this as an age of bio nanotech imperialism, because for me, it is about empire. And I will even say within the colonial mindset, that it goes back further, because that was even based on the papal bulls out of Rome. And so if we almost picture what is coming is an extension of the Roman Empire that never really went away. It just keeps subsiding and then resurfacing, resurfacing in Venice, resurfacing in London, resurfacing in Wall Street. It goes away and then it resurfaces. But this time with the blockchain, and these molecular systems that rely on physics and knowledges that most regular people have no clue about, that the empire is almost becoming invisible and everywhere at the same time. Does that make, I'll pause for a second. Does that make sense?
No.
It doesn't make sense.
I mean, I think what's so mind-boggling to me is like, it sounds like a mad scientist would come up with this shit.
I think they did.
Seriously, like you have to be, because like I would never think of something like this to like, it's anti-life.
It is an anti-life program. But in that, I think if we can have clarity about what this actually is and understand it not as like, here, sign up for your digital identity, kids in school, so you can get free college, or you can get Medicaid, or you can get on these free programs. And you could become a dependent of empire, right? And that's what's so hard, is that the systems have been corrupted all along. If you understood it as a project of empire, like, do you want to be a citizen of an imperial project? I think there's probably a subset of the managerial class that for whom it will work out. The data analysts, like certain people will be credentialed, but it's going to be a pretty thin slice of society that gets to be at that level. And for the most part, I would think, Stephen Newcomb talks about it like a dome, that there's a dome. And then, the deal was the ship showed up and they say, well, you can be under our dome and we'll give you some rights, or you can aspire to some certain rights, and you can think you can take things to the Supreme Court. Probably not gonna work out for you, but we'll tell you that it will. And you can like live under the dome. But if you don't want to live under the dome, we're gonna send the full force of our military to wipe you off the planet. And that's kind of the bargain. And so what I'm saying is, and I mentioned before that we're doing some like DEIJ work, at work. And, I said, okay, so before we get all started on all of this, is the answer to equity that we are fixing living under the dome? At this stage of the game, is there a consensus that living under the dome is going to end up working out? Because right now we're living under the dome in BlackRock and Blackstone, and it hasn't worked out so well. Mm-mm. Is it fixable? Like, I don't know that it's maybe we shouldn't be trying to fix this thing. We should get out of the dome. And I think that's what Trudell said. He's like, the lie is that this is civilization, or if that's not the lie, then the lie is civilization is good for us. Wow. Okay, so let me see. So you can see it now? All right, so let me see. I'm clicking over. Okay, so this is what I was talking about, invisible weapons. So this is a person, his name is Lincoln Cannon, and he was also kind of grumpy with me on Twitter. And he's the founder, or a founder, of the Mormon Transhumanist Association. And so it's important to know that, and I would say—
Can we tell people what transhumanism is, just for people who may not know?
Yeah, so the idea of transhumanism is sort of that, it's along the lines of like human, like convergence of life with machines or technology.
Right. Technology and humans colliding.
Yeah. And maybe not even just humans, maybe any living beings. I don't know, the transhumanists might picture transhumanist plants or transhumanist, animals other than humans.
Yeah, why stop at humans, right?
Yeah, no, MIT is actually, you should look up cyborg botany. That's actually in my slides from my other talk. Like they already started with the nano wires in plants. And they said, now we're moving from having screen-based interfaces to that you will have nanowires in living beings in plants, and then you will communicate through the plants. And so they would have in the clip, like a woman in one room patting on a little potted plant on her desk. And then clearly there was another person somewhere else with a potted plant, and then his plant moved. So they were like communicating through the cyborg plants, which is what they're imagining the whole world is going to be like if they accomplish this nanotechnology cybernetic system. So I will say, a lot of this very hot cutting edge technology, cutting edge biotechnology, optogenetics, as well as state intelligence apparatus is really centered on Salt Lake City, which was one of the first nodes of the ARPANET that became the internet. And while I think Mr. Cannon is probably an outlier in the general people who practice the faith of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if you actually look at the investments of the church, they're very much in very high level disruptive technologies, including biotech. And so while this might sound far-fetched, and I can share the link to the full talk. It's only about 18 minutes, his presentation about transhumanism. I think it's very
There's a whole association, a Mormon Transhumanist Association.
Yes. So, so that he would potentially be connected with the investors in the church in these high-level technologies. So here, this is just a very short clip, but he's talking about how, if you can picture what I just said about the ships coming on the shore and the people on the shore not really having any words to imagine what was coming, and me saying that is us now and we're on the shore and the ships of nanotechnology are coming and we just don't even have any framework to latch onto to what it means. And so this is what I think he's talking about. He doesn't say he's talking about nanotechnology, but reading between the lines, that's what I think it's about.
Maybe you just don't see anything in this picture that you recognize as technology. And just because technology isn't obvious doesn't mean it's absent.
Okay, so
oh, you kind of breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. And just because you can't see it doesn't mean that it's absent. Did that come through? Am I still around?
Yeah, I can hear you now, but when you were talking before, we couldn't hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm not sure about where I can go. I guess I can run down to the living room if it gets too bad.
It's fine. Keep going. You're good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So anyway, he was just saying, like, I don't know if you saw the clip, but that
we did see the clip.
Okay, so you can't, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Okay. And that's the way I feel about the nanotechnology.
Maybe you just don't see.
Yeah. Okay. How do we go through? Okay. So just in terms of patents, and I know like we hear a lot about people and talking about patented things, I would be really interested if people started talking about nanotechnology patents more. This isn't strictly nanotechnology, but this is a patent from 2001 that someone brought my attention to, maybe on Twitter. It's by this person, Hendrikus Luz, from Laguna Beach, California. He had many contracts with the Defense Department and Health and Human Services. And so he had patented something in 2001 called the remote magnetic manipulation of nervous systems. Okay. And so essentially they were going to, they framed it that they would use this technology in something like a standoff situation, but that they could manipulate the nervous system of a person from several hundred yards away. And within the patent, when you read through this patent, they also talked about that it would, this using magnetic particles and frequency from a distance to disrupt neural circuits, that it would work on other mammals as well. And so they talked about it as an animal control mechanism. Okay. And so I would just like to bring people's attention to the fact that, you know, we've seen in the news quite a bit of interest in zoological places of injecting animals, zoo animals. And so you can imagine what that might mean in a future where you could remotely manipulate humans and, I don't know, predators with frequency weapons. I mean, and again, this is 20 years ago that they had these patents. And this is something that's out in the open at this point. So it's hard to imagine, you know, what else is going on. So this is a slide that I used in my Utica talk, and I was just trying to sum everything up. And so a lot of it we talked about already, but I'm just going to read through it just to lay things out before I go on to the other slides. So if we listen to what John Trudell said, he talks about a predator energy. And for me, I feel like that is a very accurate way to talk about it because that works for a lot of different faith practices. This thing we know is global. It is a fundamental change of what life on Earth is meant to be. And so if you frame it as a predator energy, however you imagine that, I think it's less divisive. You're not putting an ism on it. And then as soon as you put an ism on something or put a nation or a person then it narrows it down. This is just a very ubiquitous energetic system. And it's to conquer the universe is essentially. So I wasn't there a couple of months ago before I understood about nanotechnology and data. But what they're trying to do is actually mine us for data at the point of molecules on our neurons, not simply to boss us around or make money off of us or be sadistic to us or enact their terrible fantasies on us, but literally there is a new system that is underway called Evolution 2.0, where they're looking at life as intelligent design as opposed to strict Darwinian evolution. And in this information system, and this is something my friend Joseph Gonzalez has explained to me and is very good as explaining here. I'm going to come over to you on this side, is that you've got the world, the universe is made of information. And there are ways of communicating with information, but there are always two pieces. There's a transmitter and a receiver. And then in between is a language that has to be understood. Okay. And so that communication can be anything. It can be the two of us talking here. It can be the people in the chat. It could be smoke signals. It could be DNA. Anything where there's information shared that enacts a response is communication. But the thing about communication theory is, how did the first communication happen? Because you've got a transmitter and a receiver. You have two parties, but how can they agree upon the language if they can't communicate? Right? And so what these crazy mad scientists are doing right now is they're messing around in the communication signals through electromagnetic frequency. But their goal is to figure out how the first communication started, meaning essentially that there is a third party involved, and likely that third party is God. However God manifests in your understanding. There is a greater being beyond the information, beyond the transmitter, beyond the receiver, that allowed the first communication to happen. And that is how you rule the universe, is that you are the ultimate coder on the top of the pyramid. And so these crazy people beyond, because it's not just about money. They have more money than they can ever spend. It's not just about power. It's about controlling the universe. It's about empire at that scale, from the tiniest molecule to the most expansive cosmos. But they have to break the code of life. So that's the next thing. So they are actually literally, in my mind, and this is my analysis, seeking a coup of God. And this is a spiritual thing. Not that there's, and I am not here because I feel like I'm a bridge across a lot of different faiths, is that whatever faith you are, whatever higher power you, as you understand it, they are trying to knock that and replace that with mad science and equations and algorithms. And so, but in order to do that, they need to unlock the code of what life is. So they are learning it. All of this, all of what we're doing now even, is they're learning us and learning us at an ever more granular level of detail. And that's what they were doing with the kids in the school with the devices.
That's what we're doing is machine learning. We're teaching the computer. Yeah.
And depending on like how many likes and shares will be weighted more or less, I'm not as popular as other people and they're weighted higher than me. And it's all balancing it out. We're teaching the AI. But the next level is actually teaching it at the level of your neurons. And so they're learning us both from the outside in and the inside out, I think is the plan, to create the singularity, not just to have it, but to use the singularity to break the code. And so in doing that, I mean, so in the meantime, yes, they are still doing social impact finance, and they're still bossing people around, and they are still enacting their patterns of domination and making life into games and making people miserable. That's all still going on. But the end game is to crack that code. So part of the controlling mechanism is that they want to flatten life into a two-dimensional. Like, on the one hand, there's this sense of ascension, right? And actually Lincoln Cannon, that's one of the things he talks about, transfiguration or ascension, that we're going beyond a third and fourth dimension into a fifth dimension. These folks are trying to squash it into 2 dimensions. And that's why graphene is so important. Among others, like, I think they're working on other 2-dimensional materials, but it's to actually pull us, like regress us from 3 and 4 dimensions to 2. And to do that in a digital format, to compress our life force into a digital format that they can store in some synthetic DNA or something in a digital formatting system. And actually, I will show you later that there's a lot of discussion now about, the right to the real, and that the real world is so unjust. But the fake world, everything can be made right. So if you actually fight to be in the real world, you're a jerk. You're racist, you're a jerk, you're just really petty, you're selfish. Because in the fake world, we can bring justice, right? Like that's how it's being set up. But the 2-dimensional world is a lot easier to control for machine learning, for the military, and also like the math of 2 dimensions is a lot easier for the people who are mathy out there. Like 3-dimensional math is a lot harder than 2-dimensional math. They're trying to flatten. And I don't know if you remember. Oh no, we talked about that. You didn't have flat Stanley, but in my kids' school, in elementary school, they had this flat Stanley where it was a scholastic book club where you would have a flat kid like on paper, and you would have a pen pal or send it somewhere to a relative or a friend who lived in another city. And then you do this geography thing, like, oh, like my flat Stanley went to Chicago. Here's a picture of my flat Stanley in Chicago. But that was all conditioning. That's all predictive programming to get people used to being just 2-dimensional flat things, which is kind of crazy. So this involves this 2-dimensionality, cybernetics, systems engineering, the nano, turning the world into a computing environment, frequencies, and weaponizing the atmosphere, because that is a lot about the geoengineering that's happening. The nanoparticulates are going to be in our food. They're putting graphene quantum dots in medical cannabis now for tracking purposes. It's in everything.
Oh my God. So that's so funny. This stuff is lining up. Wesley Muhammad said that they were putting it in weed.
Yeah. Well, why do you think, you have a bunch of
a lot of black folks
over the weed, right? And they're going to ensure the quality with quantum graphene dots, and a lot of other additives that are going to make people sick. So yeah, they're all interested in some of the plant medicines and psychedelics now because they're going to legalize them and they're going to manage them to their own.
They're legalizing them all over the place.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing to this in the data capture is I've talked to people who have been targeted, and they talk about the frequency in the discomfort is really worse when they try to fall asleep. And so I think that there are states of consciousness where people are transitioning to sleep or possibly into a hallucinogenic state or an altered consciousness. If you were trying to get all of the data to unlock the key of life, you want that too, right? You want all that stuff. You'd love to microdose people and get that data of what their mind is how their mind is working in that state of consciousness. Because you really need everything. And they're just hoovering it all up. But they need to have the nanoparticles in to track to get all of the data back. And that's where your digital identity and your digital twin is going to come in. Okay, so they want to turn robots into people and people into robots. They kind of call it centaurs. That's this woman from DARPA has talked about centaurs as the word. We talked about graphene. The digital twins are about flattening everybody out and really breaking our relationships in the real world to one another and to land and other beings.
Well, they're starting to do that now, like setting up the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated, even within families. Yeah. I don't know if you saw, what's her name? Oprah's best friend that's on CBS, whatever her name is. She said, huge viewership on national television. If my family members aren't vaccinated, they can't come to Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's the information warfare. And then the thing is, once you understand social physics, And like Facebook is working with DARPA to do like,
what's DARPA?
The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It's like the cutting edge defense, like the high tech mad scientists defense, like, and public-private partnerships. They fund private research.
So they're using social justice.
Like actually at the Applied Physics Lab, which is outside of Baltimore, it's in, Northern Maryland, like, the NSA part of Maryland. Like I went to the Applied Physics Lab because they were working on, Facebook was working with DARPA on social physics. Like they'll weight things. So is it Robin? Is that the woman's name? Like they'll look at her viewership on Twitter or whatever, and then figure out based on, she'll send a targeted tweet, and then they'll see what the response is, and they've got the analytics, and then they'll have a feedback loop. And that's what the cybernetics are about, is then refining.
So the social media companies promote certain people and they shadow ban certain people.
Yeah. But then they also promote certain people, and then they see what the message is, and then they see what the response is, and then they tweak it a little bit. Because that's the thing I realized when I was in the education space. There's a company called Frameworks. And what I
heard of that company.
Yeah, they would do social science research, very sophisticated. And they would do focus groups, and they would say, okay, this is where people are. This is where we want people to go. Like we want people to love their Chromebook. So how do we message it gradually to move them to where we want them to be? And then they would have a toolkit, and they would say, here's your press releases, here are your talking points.
That's big in the social justice world. Oh my God.
Oh, yeah. And then they would just say, okay, so we always say this, we never say that. And they literally have a toolkit. That's why like you start paying attention, and it's all the same language.
I can't tell you how many times I've seen a damn toolkit in the last few years. And it literally is their sample tweets, all of this shit.
Yes,
I didn't realize it.
Oh, military.
That's military? Damn.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, DARPA, like in the Defense Department, they have the money to hire like all of the behavioral scientists and all of the anthropologists. I mean, they know how to work. That's what Cambridge Analytica was. I mean, that's, they know how to move people the way they want. But so that for me is it. Plus, that's not even counting the frequency stuff. That's just like general propaganda, not counting like what they might have with their nanoparticles. So, that's why I feel like really strongly that this is an engagement of spirit, right? Like this is an engagement of something beyond the material realm, because like we've got to call in all the stuff. Like I am committed that I believe that life stands with life, that it doesn't end the way these crazy people think it's going to end. And, and that's why I look with great respect at the Black community and the Indigenous community, because the erasure didn't happen. Like, not that it's not ongoing, that the domination isn't ongoing, but they didn't get what they wanted in the end.
Right.
So, I mean, the struggle continues. And so that's the learning curve, but that's why it's so hard that I think those communities were targeted particularly early on, so that they would be sidelined in this conversation. Because if you have the conversation within the frame that I'm trying to advance is what I think is the right frame, it's very powerful. It's like this moment of reckoning. It would be the reckoning of, figuring it out, because we're all in collective trauma. Like there are people definitely who are harmed more than others, but it's not working for anyone. And so we got to break this dome, but we have to do it together. No subset identity politics group is going to be able to break the dome by themselves. Like really, we need to flip it, I guess, or whatever, but we've got to all get out from under it and build something else from a place of true healing, So not that I know exactly how that happens, but that's how I feel about it. So so that's just my last line. So they're framing all of these changes as sustainability and as social justice, because it's the conversation we've been having over and over again. Like, hey, do we need more data? Will this be fixed with more data? Do we actually believe that it's just like if we just had a little bit better data that we would fix the problem? Or did we know enough 10 years ago, 20, 50 years ago to fix the problem? Right. And so, that's so the metrics tied to both the climate, the sustainability and poverty and race and everything, they just want to use this as a justification to track people and impose like widespread surveillance. But I do think love wins. Like, that's the thing. Like, I think if we can, as John Trudell said, work from a place of clarity, then I think we're unstoppable. So that's that. Okay, so I'm an art history person, so this was my a Currier and Ives print of settler colonialism. So I keep saying I need a global peace movement of moms against artificial intelligence. And that's right. That's how I keep framing it. And so I saw this picture and I'm like, oh, this says a lot. Like, I'm not great at memes. This is like probably my long form nerd meme. But like on the one hand, you've got, the natural world. You have these mountains, you have water, and water, as we know, like holds memory. It's very powerful. And I think as we understand frequency, I would love for people who are really looking at life within the context of water, crystalline structures. I know Stefan Lanka is one of those people, Tom Cowan, to imagine like the role of water in the nanotech and the frequency stuff that's happening. But like the fight for water is real. I pictured that this train coming through.
The fight for water is getting really real. I mean,
well, and Flint, like we've seen this, like that this poisoning, this environmental poisoning to create impact markets, but then to fix the impact markets with the data analytics to break the code is central. So Manu Kruka actually had a book called, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember, but it was Empire's Tracks, and it was about the West and the railroads and how the railroads came through, and they were actually like that the defense, the military supported the corporate takeover of this manifest destiny, and both the dispossession of the existing people and then oppression of a lot of the Chinese workers who built the railroad. And so it was this a physical manifestation of empire. And so in this image, if you picture like the next phase of empire is digital imperialism, is biotechnology, imperial nanotechnology, that this train is cutting it off, right? The train is cutting off the natural world. And you've got some people, indigenous people on horseback, and they're just being blown off by the smoke in this. And so I thought, well, that smoke is kind of like graphene. Graphene presents as, particulates, black. And it's just covering over the real life. Is
this why Monsanto, and now you got my mind working, is this why Monsanto literally went to court to stop people from doing their own gardens and like doing their
control over food? But the GMO, because they're going to reframe that, they're going to attempt to pivot the GMO conversation to food as medicine and precision designed food. So what they will try to do is say, look at all the health.
Now they're going to co-opt the people who are vegans.
3D printing food and all of that. Yeah, I did an interview with Ice Age Farmer on that stuff. But they will, especially communities that have chronic illness, they'll say, well, it's flipping the whole eugenics, sort of racist eugenics frame and say, well, we care so much about you. Why don't you just give us a blood sample and we'll tell you what to eat? Oh, well, you don't want to eat that? Well, guess what? If you need food stamps, you're going to have to eat that because that's all we'll let you buy. And so I think
and there's people now, because I see it even with the vaccine. There's people now like, well, yeah, they should force the vaccines. It's going to save everybody's lives. So I can totally see people saying, yeah, just give them the damn blood sample. You should eat fruit and vegetables. What's wrong with you?
I know, but it'll be fruits and vegetables with nanotech in it. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's
well, some people think the vaccine got some shit in it too.
Yeah.
That's
they're shooting up graphene into watermelon. So like they're already doing this stuff. And a lot of it is there's an axis between your gut microbiome and your brain that's connected through your vagus nerve. And so they're actually like DuPont is in the space of
so your brain is connected to your stomach?
Yeah, like there's even in meditation, like the chakras and everything, like there's this giant nerve that goes from your brain, and it like trust your gut. There is a very close connection between gut health and brain. And then a lot of people, who have, on the spectrum, are dealing with like chronic, like leaky gut. There's an impact on your brain fog and your brain function that's connected to leaky gut syndrome, which is, again, goes back to the Roundup, and some of these other chemicals that are causing misfunction in the intestinal tract and in your gut system. Yeah, it's really deep. So
I'm gonna research that.
Pardon me?
I'm going to look into that.
Yeah, look into, there's a ton on microbiome research. I mean, honestly, when DuPont wants to engineer your microbiome so they control your brain, like who thinks that's a good idea? That's not a good idea. You know, that just watch Dark Waters. They poisoned whole towns with Teflon. Like, let's not do that again. And I would say,
I haven't watched that yet. Thank you.
You still have to watch it.
On
Now, Mark
YouTube?
Ruffalo, I'm not sure where it came out a couple years ago, December. Mark Ruffalo's film Dark Waters. You know, and I will say this is something that, you know, has been being looked into. The graphene is being used to make what they call carbon nanotubes, and that's these structures for the nano machines. And like even as like 10 years ago, people were doing research at NC State who were talking about carbon nanotubes being the next asbestos.
Wow. Okay.
And so, I mean, and that's really relevant because we know even within the space that Johnson & Johnson, which is in, you know, one of the you know, creators of the injections, but you know, they have been found criminally liable in many areas, including the baby powder, which was tainted with asbestos for years, which was something that, you know, affected like Black and Latino women disproportionately. Right. So like this history, we should learn from the history, right? Like if someone's saying, wait a minute, these carbon nanotubes might be the next asbestos. We thought the asbestos was the, you know, best thing since sliced bread, but only now it actually wasn't. What's happening, because now all of this is advancing under this EUA state of exception, right? And so there's no liability for anybody on any of it. And it's not just, you know, injections, it's also just in the environment. It's like literally this smokestack thing I'm talking about. They're shooting it into watermelons. So if you picture like, I put like a train full of bio and nanotechnology, and then you've got the telegraph lines that also follow along the train tracks, and so that's your frequency. You've got a big storm cloud, which is your particulates in the geoengineering, not just graphene, but all sorts of other kinds of engineered particles. You know, and then you're herding people from their natural environment into cities, which are, you know, I have the human plus, which is kind of the transhumanist. You know, they're waiting on the train. All the transhumanists are waiting for the train to arrive with the nanotechnology. And, you know, and then you've got the wagons and things, you know, with the social engineering happening, and you've got people cutting down the trees, which is the domination. And then you've got the schoolhouse, which is really, my friend Varun, he's in India, and he talks about the imperialized imagination, because part of what they have to colonize is your ability to think beyond what they tell you, to have some other thoughts.
Oh, they already did that. There's so many non-thinking people. It's absolutely ridiculous.
So like, I mean, it takes a certain level of imagination for me to apply these words onto the Courier and Ives print and say like, hey, guess what? Like all of these themes of the settler colonizer and the industrial civilization coming on with these new disruptive technologies are coming. But they, you know, I'm an art history person and, you know, cultural landscapes, and that's not going to be an option. You know, there's going to be no more art history people left, you know, because they don't.
I have to, you keep saying stuff that triggers things. So you know, I grew up in the rural South. I grew up in Beloit, Alabama, and my family, we still have a house on 100 acres of land that my great grandparents were able to get, even in, you know, when I argue things are still pretty overt racist, but you get the picture.
Yeah.
Every time I go home, Selma is the city that's closest to Beloit. It's in the same county. It's a part of the Black Belt. There's 4 or 5 counties in that area that are predominantly African American. And I've been noticing, because when you said that they're trying to herd us all into cities, life in Selma is continuously getting worse and worse. And not only is it like economic, because that always was kind of the issue, but it's also like so rural that people like did a lot of things for themselves. So like food, there was very few things, even when I was growing up in the 80s, that we went to the grocery store for. Like even meat. Like we had a hog pen. Like my grandmother had chickens. Like we had our own cows. Like now we didn't do the cows ourselves. They would take it to like a person or whatever. But I'm thinking about a friend that's actually been texting me recently. We went to high school together. His mother still lives there. And he's like, I think we're going to have to get mom out of there. He said, it's becoming unbearable. He said, the crime was almost, it wasn't perfect, but crime was almost unheard of in Selma. Like the violent kind of crime that's been happening recently. He said, we have cameras on the house. She has several guns, but she's a woman. She's living on her own, and we're really concerned about her, but she doesn't want to leave.
Yeah.
And to me, it's all connected in my mind. It's almost like when they wanted to gentrify all the cities, like they literally made life miserable, a living hell, right? In DC, Baltimore, like we hear Philly, about all of that. Philly, right? Life is a living hell. And so the natural thing is like, people are like, well, I'm going to scrounge up my coins and I'm moving. I'm getting the hell out of here. Hell, my mother-in-law did it. As soon as she was able to leave Washington, D.C., she moved out to Prince George's County, Maryland. Like a lot of people, if you have the wherewithal, you're going to move. And to me, it sounds like they're trying to move a lot of people out of these rural. The other thing that I found out that I thought was nuts, I'm like, where's the advocacy on this, is that there's already a few schools down there and they're not funding them. They're literally not funding the schools in these rural counties in Alabama, and it's not on national news. I was blown away when I heard about that. I'm like, why isn't this? Why are people up in an outrage about this? But of course, it's the black belt. They're all black kids. Like, black people. So I feel like sometimes we have gotten so used to not having, we've gotten so used to being treated bad. It's like people are just dealing with it the best way that they can. Yeah. And there's no outrage.
But what would national media isn't covering anything but this program, the transhumanist program, like preparation program. What's so sad is that I think the intention is to deconstruct all of the social structures, co-opt all of them, and then rebuild according to what they want. And they want the next generation, they want the young kids, and so they will reposition it, as we've talked about, like career and technical education, right? But it's not going to be at a school with a teacher who's trained in working with kids, and who knows both vocational training, and it's going to be hop in your virtual reality headset and do your online apprenticeship. But it's going to be for a job that you're never going to get, because the virtual apprenticeship is really just about harvesting your mind. Maybe you'll get to do some cybersecurity for the NSA, to run the metaverse. But it literally, I think, the movie scenario, the Ready Player One, these scenarios are coming to life.
I meant to call you about this a couple weeks ago because I'm wondering how this is connected. It's total control, but as you probably, have heard, the housing market is it's off the chain. And I know about it even from my own neighborhood. Like houses are going up for sale because people are like, wow, I can get $100,000 over what it's worth. And one of the things that caught my ear, it's been about a month ago, and it completely slipped my mind because I immediately thought about you, Alison. I said, I need to call her. But there are big hedge funds. BlackRock is one of them. Yeah. They are buying up all of the houses everywhere.
Yeah.
And running the rate up where people who are actually looking for houses, like, like individuals who want to.
You will own nothing and be happy. Yeah. No, that's.
There is. Mm-hmm. You will own nothing and be happy. You can't even find a place. I know people who are in Tennessee. I'm like, Tennessee? Really? Like, I don't think of Tennessee as being. What I'm
saying is so disproportionate. The amount of money is so disproportionate. And like, that's why, I understand the conversation about reparations and everything, but this little drop in the bucket, $1,000 a month, that doesn't fix.
No, that's not reparations. That's UBI. But I keep telling people that UBI is bullshit.
Blockchain. It's all going to morph. Like that's, the situation that they're advancing, that's what it's going to be. It's all going to be the same thing. They'll be like, okay, well, we'll prorate you in for your pain and suffering on multi-generations will give you a surcharge on your UBI for that. But, maybe some more if we get a blood test and, can prove, certain levels of connection. But that does not, the balance of power is so disproportionate right now with the hedge funds and, and it's not BlackRock. I think it's Blackstone that bought Ancestry.com. But, this was one of my realizations. I was talking with a friend who somehow it came up like Home Depot and Best Buy. And I said, well, that's all going to be smart housing. They're going to work on, that's the Ready Player One, right? They're talking about the casitas. We're going to roll these things off like the assembly line, like little freight container, smart housing, and stack them and pack them. It really is like they've got these models of casitas where they have big metal superstructures, like oh gosh, what was it? What's that like? There was that TV show that was like tic-tac-toe, but like celebrities, and they just like these big
Brady Bunch.
No, kind of. It's like, they would just stick these freight containers, and you could pull it out and move one somewhere. They've already conceptualized what this plan is. You think Best Buy isn't all over that with their smart housing? Do you think like their smart home appliances? You think Home Depot? Because those are, and heck, that is going to be paired up with Youth Build and Habitat, and they're going to do workforce development. So all those kids that don't get to go to school, they'll have apprenticeships of virtual reality headsets, and then they can like go and work in a factory making smart housing. And some of it they can do for free as volunteers in their church service. That's how it's all going to go. You think, I'm pretty sure Jimmy Carter must have some pretty good anti-aging nanobots. And that's all in Atlanta, right? So that's the CDC, wow. That's Georgia Tech, which is where the Internet of Bio-Nano things is. I don't know.
The Internet of Bio-Nano things comes out of Georgia Tech?
Yeah. Not exclusively, but this guy, Ian Akildas, has been working on it. Really, they're major players in it. So, and they're the Defense Department extension, like top level research institutions. So, yeah, anyway, I should do a couple more slides. Let me click over.
Yeah, you just trigger all this stuff, and I'm like,
it's good. People it's new stuff. So I want to make sure we get, just historical context. I woke up 2 or 3 weeks ago at 4:30 in the morning saying, I have to look at the Macy conferences again. So this stuff goes way back to the post-war era, to the late 1940s, just after World War II, where Norbert Wiener and at Penn, they had developed the ENIAC, the first all-purpose computing system that they took to Aberdeen, where they used to calculate anti-aircraft missile trajectories. And it was all feedback loops. So this idea of game theory and economics and cybernetics and Norbert Wiener, this is from 1948. He wrote a book, Cybernetics, or the Control and Communication of the Animal and the Machine. I'm just going to say that again. Control and communication in the animal and the machine. So they have been working on this for quite some time about controlling us like machines. Cybernetics itself, the cyberneticists were really interested in figuring out how the mind worked in particular. So it's this extension of mapping the brain neurons and using the brain as a computer. They've already created giant, vast mats of neural networks, that they lay out over football fields to do massive machine learning systems, and they're synthetic. But they really want to know how the human brain works. And then they want to control it, and put us through our paces so that we can, make money for the hedge funds and get the data that they want to feed into their AI systems. So cybernetics is actually the derivative is Kubernetes, which is steering, but in Latin is governor, which is really important to think about the role that governors are playing in all of this in terms of state policy, particularly Democratic governors like Cuomo and Newsom. So, what cybernetics is it talks about having a sensor and then a goal and then shifting. So what I said with weighing a tweet, right? What was the effect of that tweet? What was its reach? You have a goal and you say, did it hit or miss? And then you revise and then you keep going. So within this course, it's the idea that you will start at, a beginning point. And this is, again, based in, a lot of this has to do with the Office of Naval Research. You're a ship. There are tides and winds that will blow you off course. And so you're making your way, but you keep getting nudged. And this is the digital nudged back in line with where you need to be. and there's a dock on the other side. And so the goal is just like a game, is to get the boat into the dock. But the boat didn't get to decide what dock it was going to. And that's the whole idea with these pathways for social impact, is that there's a course that is set for you, and you have limited control over the course and what happens to you along the way. But you will be monitored, and then you will be course corrected. And that's why, I think my experience looking at ed tech is so important. I was appalled. I can remember thinking back to like 2014 and seeing these papers about Pearson and IBM saying that they were going to do personalized learning with feedback loops for kids. And I said, well, what is the feedback loop? Every kid gets their own personalized education to what end? That's almost like you're deciding what each individual child's future is going to be and conforming them to it. And then making them be that.
Yeah, I can hear somebody saying that's communist.
But but ultimately these impact markets are hyper capitalist.
Yeah, I know.
So it's a controlled system, and that's why I prefer to say predator energy, because it's a dominating force. And I would say even like my frustration with the left on all of this, and even the progressives and even the far, is that I think some of them are fine with the idea of an engineered society if they think they get to run the feedback loop.
Damn.
Right? And so, because I would wander around, Philly had a really, has had, I don't know anymore, a robust leftist scene. And I would, for like 3 years, go, well, are you talking about blockchain socialism? Like, are you doing that? Because I wouldn't do that. Like, I don't think that's the answer. That's not that's a mechanical system. That is not the way I would do it. And they didn't even know enough to engage in the conversation. They could never get them to move.
That's the thing. They're not talking about any of this. I've lost so much respect for people, like people that I thought like were like, really like holding the feet to the fire of like these capitalists and these, people who run the world, and like they're silent on all of this shit.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. Like some of these books, there's one that Yevgeny Zamyatin called We. It was like predated all the books, 1984, like Orwell. It was from the late 1920s. It was actually based on Russia, but it was a system where everybody just had a number and they were under this dome and they had no privacy except like 1 hour a day where they were allowed to have sex, but it was assigned, you had to be assigned, and there was no reproduction. It was all outsourced. And this was in the late 1920s.
That sounds like, that's crazy. I
know, it's like 1927. And so like this stuff has been going on for a really long time. But like, to me, it's at this point, I guess, like, I mean, I lean more anarchist, libertarian. It's just like, don't hurt other people. Like, let's try to be like, make things fair. Try not to like make decisions, even with the food stuff we were talking about. I have a lot of people that I'm connected with in the wellness community. And I said, people who have certain very strong feelings about what you should eat on both sides. Yeah. And I said, listen, you know what? Don't boss people around about what they eat. We should actually be allowed to eat what, like within certain reasons. I'm against industrial food systems, and that's a problem. Like the idea of industrial food and the harm that is caused both on the agricultural side of things and on the livestock things. It's all pretty bad. We have to fix that for sure. But there's not one right answer. And if like, I can totally see people who have certain things saying, well, we should program so everyone should have to eat the way I think they should eat. Because
it'll be the people on the left that do that shit.
And I'm like, no, you shouldn't do that. Like,
look at how the left wants to want to force jabs in people's arms.
It's really hard. I'm like, don't hurt other people. Like, do your do stuff, but don't. Like, I'm increasing.
They're like, fuck your religion, because, in this country right now, you can still use a religious exemption in most states. Yeah. But they're like, fuck your religion. Get the jab.
I know. Well, this is just a crazy thing. I was talking about like putting your consciousness in a machine. And so so part of what they're using graphene and hydrogel for is they're putting it in people to make them more like robots, and putting it in the robots to make them soft like people. So the graphene hydrogel. And so this is a company called Sanctuary AI. And the woman who presents on this, I don't know if you can see in the upper corner, there's a woman who's in a haptic suit in a VR. Like, so she's doing her hand, and she's the woman in the video actually talked about putting her consciousness into the computing system. That it wasn't just that she was controlling the machine, but the sensors in the machine were giving feedback into her body. It was bi-directional. So this is the future of remote work. This is globalization 4.0. This is why the whole idea of immigration and borders and nationalism doesn't work. Because on the one hand, like, I know that there are people who are saying, well, we want to fight the globalists by being nationalists. But I'm like, no, because the future is these machines where you are geofenced in a small area by your own country or by, someone who's invested in you, by BlackRock, that you're not allowed to go more than a 5-mile radius from where you live. And that on blockchain, based on your credentials, you'll be doing remote work through robots at the cheapest price, competing against people from all over the world, right? People in Ethiopia, people in the Philippines, people in Poland. Like, that's the future that they plan of labor. And nobody in the labor community gets this. And the woman who helped develop this, like, she came out of D-Wave quantum computing. So this is connecting to the quantum computing system. And one of the things I will mention, like, so this isn't actually a digital twin. Like, there's different versions, right? So she's acting through a humanoid robot. Eventually they'll probably try to design something that you don't actually have the VR headset and all the equipment. Your consciousness just goes into this alternate thing. But then you've got the avatars. And so that's part of the Japan Moonshot project, is they're saying you will live outside of a physical body and mind and time and space, and you will do that as an avatar. And so that's the two-dimensionality, again, the flattening of life into this 2 dimensions. And the crazy thing about that Nippon Telegraph and Telephone, which is one of the key forces in that, and in 6G technology, that's what 6G is going to be for, is the twinning and the robot-to-robot communication, is they're saying in the digital twin that the digital twins are being set up for medical biosensor data and precision medicine. But you'll have a digital twin, and what they're saying is they will digitally twin the entire world. They will digitally twin you. They will digitally twin your room that you're in. They will digitally twin your block. They will digitally twin the whole world, and there will be this alternate universe in the digital space. And while you can imagine that you in the real material world will be, through sensor data, impact the twin in the virtual world, what Nippon Telegraph and Telephone were saying, their goal was to have the digital twin affect you. Like, maybe you go to sleep and your digital twin goes to work and learns something, and then it's in you. Like, that's their goal. And that's the thing with the Mormon transhumanists. They're talking about replicas and multiples and multiples. And I just thought back to, like, there's a terrible Michael Keaton movie, like Multiplicity or something, where, like, he ends up.
There's a movie called Duplicity too.
Well, so, like, they've been conditioning us for this, and it sounds unbelievable. But it's not, and it's all tied to the Sustainable Development Goals, because they'll say, well, we have a much smaller carbon footprint if we just live in a freight container through a haptic suit. Look how much we've reduced our carbon footprint. We don't do anything anymore.
That's correct.
I'm not kidding. And so I connected with someone who is a teacher in Tokyo, where the Moonshot Project is based. And he went and he actually took his toddler there with dandelions to do a revocation of consent in the lobby of the Moonshot Project. And when he went in, it was all covered in the Sustainable Development Goals. And then there was a display talking about, with a running screen of kids in VR headsets. And, and he's like, I can't leave this world to my 2-year-old. And so that is what we actually have to get people to understand. The ships are coming in. It's time to learn what's on those ships. It's not a good thing. So let me, sorry. I keep picking the wrong control. Okay, so I just touched on before, like, rule by an electron microscope. I mean, that's an element of class, and, like, you would think that the left would get this. If what you're saying is that the only people who are allowed to be arbiters of how we function in society are the people who control the electron microscopes, who determine reality, and determine how we react in the real world. The people who are credentialed, who have the skills to operate the electron microscope, are credentialed through the system. So you have to actually, there's a book by Jeff Schmidt called Disciplined Minds, about how people who go on and get PhDs and everything are made to conform, because if you don't conform, they kick you out.
Yes, the people with the PhDs, and I don't want to, I do not mean to offend anybody, but these are the main people that are marching us down this shit right now.
Because if you don't agree, you get
they're
kicked
telling
out.
you to conform, just conform, just conform. And some of these people I really love. Like, I mean, there's very few people that I know that have went through like Harvard and still kept some, you know, like they were able to do the double consciousness that Carter G. Woodson talked about. Like they were still able to keep some of themselves and not be fully, I call it lobotomy factories. Like the full, if you get a PhD, the full lobotomy 9 times out of 10 has happened to you. You're a complete controlled being. And I see it. But there's some people that I know that are PhDs that are not, but the vast majority of them, I just look at them and I'm talking to them. I'm thinking to myself, you damn fool.
And Zakia, I mean, the thing is, like, none of this stuff is super hidden. Like, there are people who on paper are far more qualified to be talking about these issues than I am. But they're not, as far as I can tell. Like every single person, like and so either you've been trained and you've been, you know, your consciousness has been conformed into what it needs to be to do this job and to succeed in a meritocracy, because that's what the dome does. It says there's only a few of y'all that are going to get here, and you know, and this is what you do. If you want to be a success in the world, you follow this course and you sacrifice everything, and then you get there, and that means you're a good person. And that's how this world is set up. I mean, that's how the West does it. And then, you know, a lot of people have tremendous financial debt. Either they're indebted for their network, right? Or
that's why they're not getting rid of the student loan debt. I thought about you too. If Biden was like, nope, we're not going to even do 50,000 now. We're not getting rid of any of it.
No, I know, because they need people who will not speak out. So what I'm saying is, like, even if you're a PhD and you've got the skill set to run this electron microscope, like you've got to get permits to use them. Like, it's not like, I mean, they're I think that the low end is like 60,000, right? But they go up to tens of millions of dollars. And, you know, I will say it's really sneaky, because I've seen people online sharing images of beautiful cells, like with beautiful coloration. Like, look at the magnificence of the cellular structure. Isn't the most amazing thing ever? And I'm like, well, one, it's outside the body, so it's not actually even, like Tom Cowan talks about that, like functioning in a real state. But two, that's conditioning to be like, oh, worship to the cell, amazing picture that you can only see on the electron microscope, right? Even though it's not real, like it's not a real functioning cell anymore. It's a representation of how they want you to imagine it. But they're millions of dollars. And say you get a cut rate used electron microscope and you try to do real science and put it out in the press, and they'll be like, what does this joker know? They only got the cheap microscope, right? It's an arms race. And so they're always going to hold out the thing and say, oh, well, you don't have legitimacy because you didn't get the newest telescope. But you know, at the Yale, like, to use their telescope, you've got to get certified to the tunes of several thousands of dollars to even use it. You think Yale's going to let some yokel come in and use their stuff? No. You know, so if we are talking gain of function, what we're doing is we're saying that we're allowing ourselves to be ruled by the people who are in charge of the electron microscopes, which is a very, very small group of people who are under control of a very dominating system, for better or for worse. You know, and I don't think people go into it with that in mind, but once you've gone through the whole thing, that's where you end up with at the end, is control by the electron.
So the only thing we can really hope for is some whistleblower, some person who gains a conscience and like they have the knowledge to be able to reverse some of this shit. Like, I have to think optimistically.
Yeah. Well, and it seemed like Quinta Columna did that work. And so, you know, and I've seen the microscopy, again, it's in Spanish, so then it has to be translated. And, you know, I haven't listened. I know that there are some like high profile figures who've been poking holes in that. But what I would say is, like, once you know graphene is a thing, is an adjuvant, is in everything, you can kind of appreciate that they brought this into the spotlight, but it doesn't rest on one group of people at this point. It's actually something so much bigger. And so if there were people who are trying to push the issue of graphene as an adjuvant and all of these other uses off stage, then I would say discerning media consumers should ask themselves why that is happening.
Yeah.
So this is just a little bit of background. I did a whole talk with Jason. So it was 3 different talks. 2 of them were on nanotech in New York, upstate New York. And then there was a third one that I did on the MITRE company. And I will just give you a little bit of background. MITRE, M-I-T-R-E, but it's interesting because like MITRE is also like the, you know, the bishop's hat too. So there's like also.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like I think the Episcopal and the Catholic bishops have the MITRE hat, like the pointy hat. And there's a lot of faith community involvement.
Oh, the pointy hat. Yeah,
like
the
bishop goes
bishop.
up and then it points.
It goes up,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, so MITRE was actually created in 1958 in response to Sputnik. And it came out of MIT, but it was in conjunction with the guy was also the first satellite, the Russian satellite that kicked off the Cold War. It was like, oh, we're not ready, you know. And then this guy, I think it's like, it's not Gaither. He was the head of the Ford Foundation at the time and ran, so military. And then he went on to create the first venture capital firm in the West Coast that built Silicon Valley. And so he wrote a memo to Eisenhower saying, we're not nearly prepared. And so then we started the vast sort of what I imagine as the weaponization of the atmosphere through the radar systems, through the anti-aircraft nuclear threat initiatives. I think it was called, oh gosh, it'll come to me. I've spaced. It starts with an S. It'll come up. But so that was their origins, and then they later moved on. So MITRE is a nonprofit company. It's a skunk works. So if we understand how things are shuffled off to the side so they're totally not accountable, like that's what MITRE is. It's the defense contracting system where they can put money, but these are the managerial class that keep everything running, keep the agenda going no matter who's in office, right? These people have been around for forever.
Right.
So they moved from just the missile defense systems into air traffic control systems and eventually cybersecurity systems, wargaming and simulation systems, then cybersecurity, and now they're doing big data government and IT Medicaid. So it's the straight through line from the late 50s till now of essentially controlling the control of the animal and the machine. That's exactly what Wiener was about. And so they're doing it through frequency, which all goes back to these early radar systems, and then the satellite systems, and then the geoengineering systems. And so if you understand it as an assault on natural life and consciousness by the military, but for our safety, right? And so that's the thing, is it's always been phrased for our safety, for our well-being. And so you don't question it because you're like, of course. But once you understand where this trajectory went, like how do we go from anti-aircraft to big data government and Medicaid IT and cybernetics and knowing this Internet of Bio-Nano things, and that these people are involved in augmented reality and drones and blockchain and every darn thing you can imagine. Well, starting in 1992, they were working on nanoelectronics. 1992. And I think this is 1997, they wrote a whole paper, this guy Ellenbogen, who worked very closely with Charles Lieber out of Harvard, who early on, there was that spate where he was arrested for taking money and working in China on this 10,000 Talents program. But then that rapidly went away. But Charles Lieber was working on nanoelectronics with MITRE. He was based out of Harvard for 20 plus years with this guy Ellenbogen, who wrote The Matter as Software. So if you understand their plan is to program life. And they're programming it so that they can also get our data to break the code. So MITRE is very central.
I have a quick question. You were talking about like the frequencies and stuff like that. I mean, clearly they can manipulate them, but can frequency also cause disease?
I mean, that's what it seems like. It fragments. I mean, I'm not a medical professional, but it affects your cellular function, right? And we know, like, even from like high level electrical lines and power lines, that there are dangers of living in proximity to that, of various illnesses that come along. And I will say, because this will touch on some stuff I'll talk about later, but there are papers about dirty electricity and it creating both diabetes and MS and impacts. So if you imagine what we're talking about in the future, with all of these small cell installations, with all of these frequencies added, and potentially in combination with nanoparticulates, that they could be creating chronic illness in the form of diabetes, and then telling everyone to manage your diabetes with food and exercise, and then harvesting all of, like, you can't, you know, it's like telling someone in Flint to be healthy and drink their water, you know, their poisoned water. Like, you can't be healthy in a poisoned environment. And ultimately, the environmental racism that has really focused on the Black community and you know, other low-income communities is going, you know, the military bases and people where they were hiding all sorts of toxins. Like, that's going to be everybody, because it's going to be the whole atmosphere. It's just going to be ramping up and up, because to get the digital twinning and to get the robots, they need the 6G, 7G, on and on with all of the Gs. And the crazy thing is, I just found out that there's a flagship project in Europe for 6G that's based in Finland, and they call it 6 Genesis.
Oh, to make it more.
Well, if you look up what the 6th chapter of Genesis is, and I'm not like an eschatology person, right? Like, that isn't my thing, but like literally it's called 6 Genesis. So you're like, well, what is 6 Genesis? It's the Nephilim.
What is that?
It's like the fallen angels, like, mating with women and having, like, you know, the transhumanism. And then the God is like, this is a mess, let's flood the world. And then it's Noah. So it's like the Nephilim and Noah are chapter 6 of Genesis. And that's the name they picked for their 6G project in Finland.
I figured they picked Genesis because, you know, it'll make people more comfortable because it's a Bible book.
Well, but it is that particular story, because there's a lot in Revelations that talking about, like, mixing iron and clay and other aspects that do relate to the transhumanism narrative. And, you know, I don't go to esoteric at first, but, like, you know, you do when they pay attention to the words they choose. It doesn't just happen by accident. They're very intentional.
Yeah, they're very intentional. Yeah.
So programmable matter. And then, okay, so this is a crazy thing. This week I spent like 2 days straight reading a book from 1996 about nanotechnology. And it's sort of a futurist book, and they're projecting how they imagine the future. And they're talking about something called utility fog. Okay. So this is where we get down to physics. Like, and I never even took a physics class, so I'm not claiming in any way to be, but it seems like a knowledge of molecular level physics seems pretty important, because they were imagining essentially with nanotechnology and assembling little nano robots at a molecular level, that they would, like, recreate the world with these nano robots. And that would be a fog, and that you could sort of interact with it with your mind and recreate reality however you wanted to create it. So I'm just going to read this. This is by this guy, J. Storrs Hall, and he was connected with this nano fabrication. And the problem with making the nano machines is that really it's molecule by molecule, and they couldn't figure out how to make the machine that would put the molecules together. They call it like the fat fingers problem. But they've been trying to design these tips, like a tip that would essentially be like making something in CAD, like computer aided design, and then it would manifest at the molecular level. Like that there would be a machine that you could design something on a screen, or eventually I'm sure you would just imagine it in your head. And then there would be a little tip, and it go, you know, like a 3D printer, but at a molecule level, and make the thing. So this is how they're imagining it. It said, I'll just read this. Imagine a microscopic robot about the size of a single human cell. It has a body about the size of a bacterium and several arms sticking out in all directions. A bucket full of such robots might form a robot crystal. by linking their arms together in a lattice structure. So that's kind of like graphene, which is hexagonal, which is important, like the whole hexagon and 666 stuff. Now take a room with people, furniture, and other objects in it. It's still mostly empty air, and you fill it completely full of robots. And with the right programming, the robots can exert any force in any direction on the surface of any object. They can hold any object up so that it apparently floats in the air. They can hold you up, applying the same pressure to the seat of your pants that your chair would. They can exert the same resisting forces that your elbows and fingertips would expect from your arms in the back of a chair. A program running in utility fog could thus simulate the physical existence of almost any object.
This is written in 1996?
Yeah.
The book title is called A Pall of Air?
Well, that was the chapter, and I have the source link. I'll send you the link to the slide deck. I have this. I downloaded it and I put it on my blog so I could have. It's about a 250-page book, but this guy J. Storrs Hall is very important in trying to figure out how to fabricate these robots. But they're imagining and you can kind of picture even within the whole, like, I don't really watch these, but like the Marvel movie franchises and the superheroes and, telekinetic, even the whole Black Panther franchise, like, it's a setup for this, right? It's a setup to make this like, oh, look how cool this is. Like, you can fly through the air, like with the nano robots. Look, you're just like a superhero. They want to condition the kids to be in that space. So I'm just saying.
Is this a science? Is a question? Is this a science fiction book?
No. The whole first chapter is all about like all of the very specific physics equations that they've been working on and how to do it. The question is like getting them. They call it an assembler, getting the molecular assembler ready and scaled. And I don't know to what extent. Like, I know that and I'll show this later, but they're using electric frequencies to assemble nanoparticles into nanowires. That's what Charles Lieber was working on. So exactly how the nanowires relate to these utility fog elements that they're talking about, I don't know exactly, but they're we're 20 years into this, and some of the stuff that they're developing.
Almost 30 years, 96.
Yeah, we're getting there. It's pretty intense.
2026, yeah.
So that's the utility fog. So this is this is Ian Akildes out of
Lord have mercy.
Georgia Tech. So like, this is the utility fog, right?
Everybody watching this, y'all should screenshot this.
I have the source. It's a whole slide share. So this was from 2010, and IEEE is like the premier electrical engineering, association globally. And so this Akildes, he's at Georgia Tech, that's defense contracting. And so this is what they're really talking about, is that you will have this, this utility fog wandering around in the fog, and there's dots and things, and you'll interact with the world through just your thoughts and frequencies and the nanotech, molecular communication. Because it's so hard to like hold your phone or turn on the TV. It'll all just like live in you. So this is like, I think, the vision of what they imagine utility fog is, that they're trying to build. So this is just touching on Charles Lieber. So now, like, if you follow these things, he's got a trial, and he's got cancer, and my take is like, I don't wish this gentleman badly. I wish he would sort of think about what he's actually doing, building this utility fog. I think more than likely he is just being taken off stage to work somewhere off with a new identity somewhere, right? Like, he's very valuable individual in this overall equation. But the nanowire transistors that he was working with Miter and Ellenbogen do contain graphene. So you can see here, this is a lot of it. He does a lot of work with China, but again, he's based at Harvard. So it's graphene and nanowire transistors for cellular interface.
Do you think that they pilot a lot of this shit in Asian countries because, and forgive my ignorance, I've never been to those countries and all of that, and I'm certainly a victim probably of American propaganda all these years, but do you believe that because you mentioned Japan and China in several times in this, or a couple times I think, in this presentation, do you think that this shit is like further along in those countries because like people are more, how do I say it? Like the populace already sort of like the government already has this inordinate amount of control and they can just, it's easier like to get the shit through, and like there won't be like all the protests that we see in Europe. I mean, because there's not many protests in the United States, but like Israel, like there's like people
there's
are
a lot of
pushing back.
nanobiotech in Israel for sure. There's an awful lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, once you understand that this is a program, like if you imagine, like I keep saying, the predator energy that's not about a nationalist, that in some respects, even the Cold War, once I revisited what MITRE was doing and what this ultimate plan of like frequency level weaponization is like, wow, maybe the Cold War was totally not what we were told, right? I mean, that there was certainly jockeying, but maybe like every part of the world was given its task to work on for, you know, 40 years or so. And Russia did a whole lot of work in sort of psychology and parapsychology. And I mean, granted, the MK Ultra people here were doing it too, but like they were really intensely focused in.
That was a CIA program, right?
Yeah, but in Russia, they were doing a lot of that work in Jonathan Moreno, like more openly. We were probably still doing it not as openly. But Jonathan Moreno has a book called Mind Wars about military and brain science. So, you know, maybe China was set to work on the AI, and then all of a sudden, boop, like all the pieces come together. And so I would say in the nano neurotech space, and I'll show some other things with James Giordano, who's a bioethicist at Georgetown and has terrifying talks online. Many of them, he just stands up in front of you and tells you all sorts of terrible things that are being planned. He talks about dual use of using medical and psychiatric interventions for weaponization purposes. And so there are several programs that are coming through DARPA that were specifically piloted through the VA, so the Veterans Administration, and they pilot in the US a lot of this stuff on veterans, on active duty soldiers and veterans. For both post-traumatic stress disorder, neurological disorders, neural interfaces, you know, paralysis, different things. So they use the military, the VA uses them as a test bed in many respects, both for the brain function part as well as some of the neurological tied to, you know, physical movement. So that's how we do it here. I mean, and then I think increasingly, you know, and that is overt in DARPA's programs. Like they're like, here's the program where we're going to develop the knowledge and the technique. Here's the knowledge where we're going to have a neural interface. Here's the one that where it's going to be bidirectional. And so they've got multiple different ones that Giordano has like surfaced. But some of this, I think they're probably also using on captive populations and institutions or
in prisons.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't have firm documentation on that, but like,
I have people's stories.
Yeah, I mean, I know the VA stuff because you just go to the DARPA website and it says what their plan is. So yeah, MITRE and LIBRE are super important. This is this guy at McGill University. Like this is one of these PhDs.
All these evil white guys, man. Damn, all of them white.
But see, I mean, Zakia, then the problem though is like then you've got the scientists, but then you've got all of the people who are gonna set up the social impact programs that are going to require biosecurity.
Well, the social impact, right? That's where you're going to get the people of color because we learn
exactly,
all the
because they're going to sell this just for your own good. Come on. So this guy is Joe Schwartz out of McGill in Canada. And I don't know if, you know, they were talking about like they were giving all of these masks that had graphene in them to the kids in the school. And then they got pulled back and they go, wait a minute, these masks have graphene. This is a problem because graphene is cytotoxic. It's toxic to cells. So then they took it off
to kids?
Yes, in schools. I mean, like this is a colonizer project.
Evil.
But see, it's not death. They just want to get them to be part of the hive mind, right? Like they want the children the most. So here's your graphene mask, you know. And so this guy is set out to say, like, look at his hands. He's like, well, you know, we know that the Department of Health just took them off the market, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And literally, like, there's all these crazy rubber ducks behind him. It's really insane. But he's holding up a picture from The Graduate, the movie. And I don't know if those people who may not be familiar, there's a scene in The Graduate where Dustin Hoffman is this young like college graduate, and he's going to embark on his career. And the man of the house pulls him aside at the fancy pool party and says, Benjamin, I have one word for you: plastics. And like the whole future, based the 60s forward is plastics. The future is plastic. What he's saying here is like the whole future is graphene. Like if this movie were made today, instead of saying plastics, they would say graphene. So this whole little video is essentially him saying, like, I know that the health department took it off, but this is such a miraculous material. It's stronger than diamonds. It's more flexible than, anything. Like it's the super perfect material. Like don't, hold on. And then I think eventually the Canadian government went back on its thing and said, oh yeah, no, graphene masks are okay. So they did actually recant eventually. But
they recanted.
Yeah.
The pressure.
Yeah. So they're like, oh yeah, no, you can have those graphene masks. That's, so that's what this guy is saying. And then
he's a PhD. Back to what we said about PhDs.
I know. So I'm gonna do this. So a lot of this research on nanotechnology and graphene and quantum dots is happening at Rice University, which is in Houston. And so this is just a short clip where they're talking about using a Tesla coil. And so a lot of this, if you look back, is connected to alternative energy and somewhat like the Tesla work, the John Wall Keeley kind of stuff, and like bringing it back in as this alternative energy.
Now, does this have anything to do with Elon Musk's company, Tesla, the cars?
Yeah. Same kind of, well, it's the technology. It's the coil technology of Nikola Tesla. And he was essentially crushed by JP Morgan Chase. And he was like crushed. Die like in a little hotel in New York City. And then they tried to steal all his papers. But they're using a Tesla coil here. And then these are nanoparticles in this tube, and they're using the electronics to make them into wires. And so the sense is that they get particles into you, and then they can use energetic frequencies to have them self-assemble. The self-assembly part is what they're really after. So let me see it. Wow. Carbon nanotubes could be the next asbestos. I think there's no sound on this, so let's go away. So you can see them. They're lining up. So they put the particles. See. And the other element that they use to assemble is LED light. So the place that I was at in upstate New York was this silicon carbide factory where it was like the original company is in Durham, but this giant fabrication was outside of Rome, New York. And so they're using the lights to activate the tubes, which are the antenna. Isn't that creepy? So and then the other element of lights that they use is called optogenetics, and they use it to activate cell function.
You should have been a teacher. You are really good at I'm serious. The way that you synthesize this information, you use videos, then you got the graphics that you put together. This is really well put together.
Well, like I said, I have the benefit of a lot of different folks in doing this, but the fact that Rice is working on the quantum dots that were tied to injection tracking, quantum dots, as I mentioned before, the cannabis tracking, the food tracking, everything is going to be connected that way.
And they put this shit out because they know most of us, including myself, I was never any good at science. But they know most of us don't know what the fuck we looking at anyway. Like I could have watched that video on YouTube and I'd have just been like, oh, yeah.
Well, it's context, right? And see, that's, I think my skill is that because I was a landscape person, like I see like breadth. Like I can synthesize things and say, this relates to this relates to that. And then I don't know, maybe I did bad things in a past life that I'm supposed to be paying it back. I'm like, how do I understand these crazy people so well? Like, I don't know. But so this clip, this is a little bit longer. This is like 3 minutes, but this is fine. Crazy guy, James Giordano. So this is a webinar that he did with the Defense Department last August. And I would really encourage people, like if you have a chance to, I need to put the source code on this to listen to his original lecture, which is about an hour long. He just lays it out. And I would say any community that is, understands what predictive profiling within a really oppressive system looks like. If you take that to the level of eugenics and, you know, pre-crime and biosensor data and extrapolating it and potentially using these giant data sets aggregated on both individuals and communities to use the simulation and engineer the simulation to have an effect on the real world. And I will say what's happening now is, like, we literally are living in a world right now where this virus has never been isolated. It has been modeled through fragments through the University of Chicago, the Chicago boys. They created it. They're the human capital bond market people, and they created
which virus? COVID?
Yeah. So it's never been isolated. They have a model of it, but put together from fragmented pieces that they say, look, here it is. We put it together from some scraps, but it lives in a model, in a computer model. So the computer model is then used as the basis to affect the real world, to affect how we live in the real world. So if you imagine now you have digital twins and you have digital twin neighborhoods and digital twin cities, you run that model till you get the outcome you want. If you can imagine it like a jet engine, like say you've got a real jet engine and a digital jet engine, the twin, and you say, I want to figure out how to optimize the energy efficiency, vibration, whatever, of the real engine. So I'm going to run the model and calibrate it to whatever points that I need to get the optimum thing, which is this Taylorist premise. And then I'm going to project it back onto the real thing once I get all of the settings right. But do that for society. Do that for a person. Do that for a person's health. That's what precision medicine is about to do. Once they get the nanoparticulates in us, they could literally engineer us, and not just in like a goofy zombie way. Like, I get kind of frustrated with people who are a little sloppy about just being like, hey, we're just going to be a zombie. Like, there is a specific way in which this is being attempted. Like, and I don't say it's a fait accompli. I don't know that I'd be able to execute these crazy ideas that they have in mind. But we shouldn't be so sloppy as just to like say, oh, we're just going to be zombies, or we're just going to be a hive mind. Like, people need to start to grapple with what the technique is, or we're never going to get how to resolve it, like how to deal with the frequencies, how to deal with the nanoparticulates if we're not understanding the structure. So here, I'm going to run the I'm
going to put it on the big screen so people can really see it good.
Data allows is for much more of a temporally broad palette, literally from birth to grave. And that palette needs to then be accessible, and articulable in relatively real time. So if I'm going to know about you for reasons that are important to your personalized and or precision health, well, then those data have to be about you, and I have to be able to retrieve those data about you with your name on it, with some fingerprint, footprint, data print that allows me to de-anonymize those data and use them in a way that is specific and precise for you. What these data allow us to do is maximize storage, engage parallel computing, work in ways that are scalable and customizable and accessible and shareable by the users and by the custodians of these data. And some of that shareability is legitimate shareability, and others may be somewhat more cryptic. But what this allows is a tremendous capability in data acquisition and tracking across domains that go from the cellular all the way to the social, across levels from individuals to populations, across geographies, allowing relatively complete geospatial access at any real point in time, which is part of the point, to be able to pinpoint this person is here at this particular time doing these things, and we can relate that spatio-temporal reality to various factors of their past in terms of physiological characteristics, behavioral characteristics, social dynamics, ecological dynamics, genotypic characteristics, and in so doing, utilize these data engines in a pattern generative predictive way, which then allows us to work across time and to work across groups, not only in a comparative way, but to determine certain norms, abnorms, and to affect those norms and abnorms, and the way the normal and abnormal are regarded and treated in a variety of circumstances and situations, from the quotidian to the critical, from the private to the public, the medical to the moral.
So that's kind of crazy. I know he talks pretty fast. He talks about as fast as me, but like literally it's talking about visualization and brain conditioning. And what you're imagining is like at every level, they're aggregating this data and they're making predictions and they're shaping norms, right? And so I think, you know, the past, and this is last August, so he knows exactly what he's talking about, shaping norms. You know, that was well underway at the time of shaping the norms. And so that's what we're living in. And those of us who aren't in a position of just throwing ourselves into the deep end of just being the norm, right? Who might be inclined to condition the norm or wish that there was something that wasn't the norm, are not going to be allowed to, you know, it's going to be attempted erasure of that, I think, is what's coming. And it's all going to be done through the biosecurity apparatus. I mean, do you have thoughts like based on your experience as a Black woman, like when you hear that, like?
Of course. I mean, to some extent, we've been controlled in some way or another since our arrival to these shores. So this, to me, from what I hear, is ultimate control because I mean, it's biology. It's like it's inside. You know what I mean? It's that level of control, and it's sick.
Yeah.
I mean, but these mad people have always been sick. Like when you think about how gynecology, for example, when you think about like these men, like the most of them are men, sadly. I mean, he literally took these enslaved Black women, and like experimented on them, literally. And it's just, I do not have the wherewithal in me to ever be able to conceive to do anything like that to another human being, no matter how they looked.
Yeah.
And so it's, but at the same time, I feel like this level of stuff, like I just have to believe that there's going to be some kind of intervention, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to believe that, yeah, that there will be, but I mean, it's so hard because if you could actually get even a 2-minute clip out into the world, into the minds of people, like I actually shared this clip there. Somebody like had a tweet today, like shaming, like, you know, hesitancy or whatever. And, you know, I said,
a lot of that is happening.
Well, and so it came on my radar and I put this out and I said, you know, there's a lot of stuff people don't know that's happening that actually can cause tremendous harm. And they're not going to tell you about it. So could you please look up this guy? He's at Georgetown. He's a bioethicist, right? Like if you were looking for someone to say, oh, who has a legitimate credential to be the expert, it would be Giordano. And listen to what he's saying. This is the world that we are leaving for the children. You know, and all of the other, because, you know, they're not going to stop with engineering humans. I mean, they already started with the cyborg botany over at MIT, right? I mean, they're going to go engineer the bees. They're going to engineer the plants. They're going to engineer the lightning. Everything is going to be part of this planetary computer, which, you know, for me in January, I thought, okay, well, that just means a data set on a dashboard. I wasn't thinking of it at a molecular level, a level where we're existing in a utility fog. And if we could actually get people to see that as a military project, but I don't know how we get through. Like I have a hard time getting through with my family. And this is a primary source document. Like this is Department of Defense. If they're saying this, like, shouldn't there be ethical conversations? I mean, I say that around my house, like, you know, I have someone in my house who's connected to a major academic institution. And I'm like, don't you think people should be talking about this before we do this? Because this is going to be woven into Medicaid and Medicare and the VA and TANF and SNAP and everything. And smart cities. Shouldn't we all be talking about what he just said?
But they condition people.
Going through the performance of these trainings about racial justice, if we're not going to talk about that, it's irrelevant. I mean, I'm sorry to be harsh, but like if we don't deal with this thing, nothing else really matters.
Yeah.
I mean, and deal with it within the context of race and class and domination and what this country really is. Like, I'm not saying that it's a part of that. It's an extension of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a question here, and thank you guys for your patience. I'm trying to listen and watch the. So looks like a couple people wanted to know. This was, I think, when the video was playing. Yeah. The question is, are they trying to create perfect humans with no diseases?
So this is my assessment, and I'll talk about this a little bit later. And I know it's getting late, but I think we need to revisit our understanding of eugenics. And this was kind of another line.
This is it.
Right. And so it has to do with
definitely eugenics,
the ultimate goal. But people are holding on to an understanding of eugenics connected to a time with a different economic imperative, right?
Right.
And so, I think there are a lot of people who are still very focused on mass death. They say, look at the Georgia Guidestones, it's mass death. Look at the Deagle Report, it's mass death. And my take on this is that if this predator energy, egregore, what have you, feeds off of negative feelings and fear, if you picture an energy node, like the Georgia Guidestones could be an amazing energy node for the creation of dark, fearful energy in that space. That it's like a battery for that, right? Because people can always point to it and say, see how terrible it is? And then it gets a fix. It's like an adrenaline rush of like bad stuff, right? So it doesn't even necessarily have to be real if they can make people think it's real and then make them feel bad. That's the energy harvest. So I think the goal is actually not mass death, and it's not a virile, strong, strong, blonde, the Nazi version of eugenics. What these people want is they would like a large population, a large diverse data set of mostly incapacitated, both intellectually and physically, people who can still yield up the data that they want. And through
to what end? What are they doing with the data?
They're breaking the code of life. That's the code of God. Like, if that's the frame, and I think based in my analysis right now, that's where I'm at, which is, again, I'm not to say you have to believe me or that I couldn't change it when I get more information. But if George Church out of Harvard and Perry Marshall, the business consultant, and this other guy out of Oxford, this other guy out of Florida State, if they're planning on evolution 2.0 and Lamarckian epigenetics and intelligent design, and they're trying to crack the code of life for a measly $10 million, which is really not very much payout for a coup of the universe, a universal domination, then I think we should pay attention to that. And to crack that code, they need all of the data. They need it all. And that's why everything has to be barcoded and tracked with the biosensor level data. But they don't want people who are smart enough to fight back. They don't want people who are unified enough to fight back. And they don't want people who are physically strong. But they do want people who can fuel it with their piezoelectric energy harvest. And they do want people who can feed it data. And so that's where I'm at, is they don't necessarily want particularly healthy people. Because if you were healthy, maybe it would be harder to justify the biosensor. They need you to live in fear of future pandemic, which is why we should not buy into the gain of function narrative, rule by electron microscope. They want us to live in perpetual fear of the next thing. Like, oh, well, this one is the flu, but the next one, maybe the military did something terrible. And I guess we need the biosensor because maybe DARPA unleashed it on us. And, we should all, no, like, we shouldn't play that game. So that's where I'm at. Like, am I right? I don't know if I'm right, but that's what I'm thinking about. I think it's about batteries. It's the Matrix, really. It's the Matrix. It's the Matrix.
That's been in the comments several times.
I know it is. Who knew, right? But that's the utility fog. When they're up there in the cloud and they're like, what's real and what's not real? That's the utility fog. We can make real whatever we decide it to be real. you know, and I'll touch on that in a second. Let me see the next slide. Oh, no. Oh, I have so many. Okay, so this is the what's real, what's not real. This guy, Dan Novi. So he's a piece of work. It's like MIT and the War Machine. Like, such a piece of work. So he actually just got his dissertation done, his defense, in January of 2019. And he was working with this guy, Ed Boyden, who was doing a lot of stuff with nanotech. And his dissertation was literally in creating synthetic hallucinations. Programming like synthetic hallucinations. And let me see what he's
after. Why wouldn't somebody step in and be like, why would we ever need to do this?
Because the War Machine needs to put it in your brain. Like literally their plan, and he was working, I think, with Magic Leap VR at some point, is that they don't want to wear the bulky headset. They want to actually go around your retina, your eyes, and project it directly into your brain. And actually, I've talked with someone who is in contact with someone who is targeted, who seems to have this already presenting. They used to work at Amazon and they see hallucinations. Only they're real. Like it's not a schizophrenia. It's like they're projecting that into their consciousness. And you can see even in the current framework, there's a lot of talk about.
So they're doing this to people and they don't know it?
Well, I mean, these are targeted people. But clearly the technology, like they're developing this technology, they're saying, we don't want Google Glass, we don't want the Oculus Rift, we just want to project it right into your brain. Bypass your eyes entirely, it'll just go in there. But this is the War Machine, that's what I'm saying. The War Machine is telling you they're playing, and this guy came out of the entertainment industry, like Hollywood, I think. He's an older, he's not a college kid, he's not a young kid. He's someone who went back to get this degree. So this is the entertainment complex working with the military. It's Disney, it's the University of, Southern California Institute for Creative Technologies. They're all about building the synthetic people, but eventually they won't even be the avatar. They'll just project it right in your brain. I mean, that's their goal. So, but people don't know. People don't even know any of this is going on unless you're in the crowd of people who are doing this. I mean, it's not really hidden. Like you can find it. I don't need any special clearance to go to MIT's page and find out what his dissertation was about. I have the copy of it, but they don't expect anyone to go looking. So this is just an infographic that I made. I keep trying to figure out how to explain it, and I'm always still kind of wordy. But if you imagine, and I guess it looks like an egg. I didn't mean for it to look like an egg. I just wanted to fit on the page. But at the inner core, all of this metaverse, this synthetic world is based on that you have a digital twin. Now, this digital twin is going to be blockchain. And it's interesting because some people are finally talking with some skepticism about blockchain now. Interesting. I have been lambasted about it for a while, but they're coming around. Or at least they're being pressured to, because it's hard not to see what's actually happening. That essentially your digital identity and your electronic wallet, and I know you can empathize with this because you have your own issues with your electronic wallet, is not actually your wallet. It is your umbilical cord to the metaverse. Damn. So it's a portal. If you picture that there's the digital world and you're in the material world, and there's a portal that connects you, a cord between your material you and your digital you, that's your wallet. That's the portal. That's how you go back and forth. That's what Mr. True got so mad at me about, talking about your wallet being the portal to the metaverse. But I think it's pretty accurate. And that the future of payment and existence is script, which again is very much in line with understanding these other, economic systems that are dominated by the company town, right? And that you won't have fiat currency, that it'll be this digital script that may or may not be usable, or usable only for certain things at certain times by certain people.
That's the ultimate control when they take away paper money.
Yep. That it's all programmed. You can have program money, and that's how these UBI or reparations. I'm pretty sure it'll be on blockchain. It'll be programmed. Here's how much you can use on food. Here's how much you can use on housing. Here's how much you can use. But you know what? If you live in the metaverse, you get a prorated. Like you could eat, it's just like the Matrix. Like you want that steak, you can eat a fake steak in the metaverse.
Jesus.
You're eating tofu, you're eating some sort of 3D printed patty if you want to eat it in the real world. But if you put on the headset, if you plug into the hive mind, you can eat steak in the metaverse with your digital payment. It's a lot cheaper. The footprint, your carbon footprint is a lot less if you eat it in the metaverse. And it's all like tracked on the biosensors. So that's the core of it, is that you have this digital twin. Now, this is all being set up now in the policy space around, we've talked about this before with the impact markets, that you've got the big data, your digital twin is going to be how you relate to your government, to the state through your electronics. It's so convenient and accountable and transparent. All of the data, now the social welfare services have been pushed over to these public-private partnerships for pay-for-success deals. So the data is going to drive the deals, and these are going to be framed around poverty management, climate crisis management, and pandemic management. So these are all the things you're going to be managed under, these emergencies that they can create to push the data analytics. And the context of the game is the smart city with all the sensors, and that they're constantly gaming. So that's what Giordano's talking about, right? How do we use all of this data at an individual social level from your cell all the way up to engineer and program and manage risk? And the risk management means that the people who are doing the impact investments, those are the hedge funds, and that's all about these differential equations. And that's, you look at Chicago and the Chicago boys and the University of Chicago and Heckman and the Argonne National Labs and their COVID simulation model and the array of things and this, futures trading market software. It's all connected. And then ultimately they want you to live in the metaverse. And ultimately, like for me, it's like harvesting your soul. Sure, they want to harvest all of your neurons activity, but in the end, they really want your spirit. Like it's a spirit eating thing that's happening. And, I've talked about from, like when I was talking about blended learning in public education, that it was like a cicada killer, that, they had these big wasps that would catch the cicadas on the wing and sting them and paralyze them and drag them into the burrow underground and lay their eggs on them and eat them on the way out, and so the poor cicada was still alive, and the cicada killer wasp larvae were like eating it. And I was like, well, that's what blended learning is in the public schools. They're just killing you from the inside out. You're inviting this thing in, but you're dying already. You just don't know it. You're paralyzed. And, I kind of feel like that's this soul harvest. Like we get these biosensors, we get this digital identity, we get this avatar, and we become paralyzed by it. And it's harvesting us from the inside out and to feed this thing that is to break the code of life and to have this coup and to rule the universe. And this is this, Wetiko, this sickness of like Western scientism that goes back centuries, whether it's the Roman Empire. I mean, there's a reason Michael Bloomberg built his European headquarters in London on
you talked about that before.
He's on there. Like there is this connect to empire, but even like within like the Francis Bacon, the Enlightenment. Well, how enlightened was the Enlightenment if this is where we came from? Like this is where we end up, the scientism approach. So, so that's that. And again, this is just touching on, the metaverse. They want to keep us out. Like this is this Substack where you can see the narrative is being shaped, reality privilege and living your life online. And these
somebody is already writing shit like that.
Yeah, they are shaming people for advocating for the real. How selfish are you? The real is so unjust. The real world is terribly unjust, but we can make the metaverse just. If you actually are advocating to be in the real world, you're selfish. And they want that disconnect. And it's interesting because I pulled, this is the Flat Stanley picture. And they have kids cut these out and send them. I mean, it's like a central part of the curriculum. And so my friend was saying, actually, this picture, this is from the Wikipedia entry, was taken on an island off the coast of Miami that has a ferry and no cars. Like it's the most expensive real estate, like almost in the US, like the highest per capita income is this private island. So the fact that they have the Flat Stanley there is really significant. And this is just an image of me, like we actually did a ceremony down on the banks of the Susquehanna on the solstice of like trying to be connected to the real, trying to be connected to nature and in a way that's outside of like consumer capitalist culture, but to hold on to the real. And I feel like I'm not being selfish holding on to the real from that space, like outside of consumer culture, but from a more,
of course,
a cultural place. So these are the people who are trying to conquer the universe. There's Perry Marshall here. I can't remember. This is the guy from Oxford. He invented the pacemaker, I think. So they're going to give you $10 million to try to, break the code of life and conquer the universe.
I saw that.
Yeah.
They're offering $10 million.
That's not very much, like, to conquer the universe. So here it is, like, they're revisiting, like, and, there's this stuff, there's like the story the regular people are told, and then there's the story the insiders get. So like what I'm hearing is like the regular people get the Darwinian evolution, but the insiders know intelligent design. So, this is Perry Marshall, and he's saying, that we should look at about decoding the information theory or the communication theory. Communication theory proves, in his words, that living things were designed and they are purposeful and teleological, and that the information in DNA operates top down, not bottom up, and that evolution is internally directed by the cell and the genome, not by external damage from the environment. So it's not mutation, it's internal to the cell. So that would overturn materialistic biology upside down. Everything we know about information, computers, and the internet show us living things are designed and evolve according to an internal genetic program. So like that's a big deal. They don't tell most regular people that. And that's what they're trying to use to break the code of life. But they have to get into the cell and they have to get the biosensor data. And that's what is going on here. This is just a slide to point out, like, University of Chicago scientists create the first computational model of the entire virus. It's a computation.
Do you think that's why they really are targeting? This makes me think about, this may sound offensive, but I know that there's been some Black scholars, and there have been maligned Black scholars, thinking about like Francis Cress Welsing and others, who have said that Africans or Black people are in some ways genetically superior in a lot of ways. And you brought up Henrietta Lacks.
Yeah.
Which we know they use her biology, her cells, to create an entire, all kinds of shit. And it makes me, I'm sorry, I keep going back to the vaccine. Because I keep thinking about.
I said, and I've done some programs with friends in India, like these entities with UNICEF, Innovation Fund, and the Singularity and the education systems, like they are specifically targeting the children of Africa and India specifically. And so I do think that there is an energetic connection between people who are closer to their connections to land and natural systems and spiritual and frequency, like resonance,
they are.
Right? Like the drumming, meditation, like it is a frequency energetic thing. And that even despite all of the trauma, that still is present. Like, and I'm hearing, and this isn't my main skill set, but that they've changed music. They've changed the tempo, the frequency into something that is less harmonic and more dissonant. Like at a very
they did
level.
that with hip hop. That's real. They did that with hip hop. Made it completely horrible, and it never started off that way.
Yeah. So they're taking things, if you understand it as a frequency energetic weapon, and that's to me why I also am very interested in looking back at the history of the ghost dance. In the face of the closing of, the full imperial conquest of Turtle Island, and in the late 19th century, and what ultimately ended up in Wounded Knee is that the U.S. military force massacred hundreds of like elderly people and women and children simply for doing a dance in the face of this level of oppression. That could catalyze such an intense response is like, to me, it shows that there is something that we can be in touch with if we have clarity. And I'm not saying it's not necessarily although like I think the people of Europe, like their indigenous ancestors, there is a connection if you go back far enough that people can be in touch with. But I don't know how to get there. Like, that's why I keep feeling like being able to articulate this for Black communities, Indigenous communities, the global South is really, really important. Because this is fake. This is models. This is a computer. This is a predator energy modeling something that it is seeking to transform the real world based on a computer model. And we have to see it for what it is. And the fact that it is embedded within these systems of futures markets, trading, smart cities, sensor technology, predictive analytics. I mean, I'm not, you know, I entertain the idea when we're talking about violence, urban violence, and clearly both Chicago, Philadelphia, these outbreaks, that people are not being affected by frequency weapons, like on top of all of the trauma and the economic harm that
I never thought about that.
That they can target communities to create, to generate that sort of intense violence against other people. Like, you know, I would not be surprised. You know, and using it for purposes of real estate speculation.
Oh my God.
I mean, can I prove it? I can't prove it, but I can't not entertain the idea knowing how I know how this works. You know, I was talking about diabetes again, the first health impact bond, you know, and this again feeds into the narrative that happened when the outbreak was unfolding, the focus on chronic illness and even the wellness community. If you don't understand, like, clearly there are chronic illnesses that are related to, you know, long-term trauma, stress, economic stress, physical violence, emotional violence, lack of food access, lack of safe exercise opportunities, but also this dirty energy, right? So you create a population, then you say, okay, so now I'm going to solve your problem, but we're in the meantime, we're actually going to create a problem that in solving it, we accomplish our end. So now we're going to put graphene biosensors on, you know, all the people who we deem at risk, even people who aren't diabetic, but who might be at risk to be diabetic, so we can track them and get the sensor data. And so this is what my friend Joseph, who is an electrical engineer, said. He said, I don't think that picture with the green dots floating out of their head is that they can do that yet, but that they need something on the body to aggregate the data and transmit it out to the smart environment, like a portal on your body that will pull the data and send it somewhere. And so I think that's what some of the wearables are now, that the Fitbits, but increasingly graphene is very flexible and it's connected to these soft robotics and it's super conductive, is that they'll have these wearable tattoos and biosensors for preventative healthcare. And this will be feeding in these risk analytics markets. But at the same time, if the diabetes is exacerbated by bad energy and frequencies, literally you're putting that on someone while you're saying, go walk around the block a bunch of times, go eat a bunch of kale, while you're poisoning them and creating the problem. So the thing about this, the first health impact bond is coming out of Sweden. It's connected with this health.
That's where the United Nations is.
Well, the UN Geneva, but Geneva, Sweden is the head of Ericsson and Nokia. So that the Scandinavian sector and Norway.
Oh, that's right, Geneva, central. Switzerland. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Scandinavia is a very central player. And at the beginning, remember, Sweden was everybody's darling. We all want to be like Sweden. I'm like, no, not, because they're the center of the fourth industrial revolution. They're the center of digital payments. They're going to be the center of e-government. I mean, Estonia is already doing the blockchain government, but they're going to be the pivot to all the social welfare tied to the data analytics. So, you know, Estonia's got the blockchain government. Sweden's got, you know, the no lockdown. Then you've got Norway that's Gro Harlem Brundtland, you know, who's all
Sweden didn't do the lockdown. Why didn't they do the lockdown again?
Well, because we're supposed to be like Sweden. We all want to be like Sweden, right? Right. You know, we want to be like Sweden. So Sweden, the Wallenberg family is one of these elite European financier families. The health impact bond, which is running through, I have to look at it a little bit closer, the health movement EIT health project with the health integrator management app. Okay. So that's how that is going through. And one of the major investors in there is this SEB group and Scandia group, Swedish banking systems, run by the Wallenberg family. Surprise, surprise. Well, Jacob Wallenberg is a Wharton MBA alum, right? So like as a Philadelphian, I have to keep getting out here and saying, guys, come on, you have the Center for Health Economics, you're doing the impact investing, you've got the blockchain, you've got gamification. Now your alumni who are these financiers in these, you know, countries that are mobilizing finance with Israel, social finance Israel. And under this, Sweden is doing smart textiles in connection with Stanford University. So they're sending their Swedish people to Stanford to work on the smart textiles. And by the way, they've got, you know, factories in Portugal. So it's all very global, but it comes back down to Wharton, gosh darn it. So you've got these diabetes, you've got Israel in the mix, you've got Scandinavia, you've got Ericsson, you've got graphene, you've got soft, bendable, wearable technology. And that's part of the Internet of Bodies. And potentially you've got stuff where you're saying carbon nanotubes could be the next asbestos. And by the way, dirty energy can cause diabetes, but you've just got to, you know, go along with the program, people, because like we care about you. We really care about
dirty energy causes diabetes and not.
Well, it exacerbates it. I mean, there's a lot of studies looking into the exacerbation of dirty energy, and now we're adding all of these extra frequencies.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's a mess. I mean, is anybody super surprised? I think we're not that surprised, but you know, Penn has the Center for Behavioral Health Incentives, Center for Health Incentives and Behavioral Economics. Okay, so I'm actually going to be doing a panel tomorrow with some folks in the UK about social prescribing.
Is it going to be online? Can I watch it?
Well, I think it's for members of this particular person's online thing, but there may be like because I'd like to get the information out afterwards, like maybe after a bit, I'll get it on my page too.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, this is really important. Social prescribing, it's all about what Michael Bloomberg is up to. So they'll set you on your health pathway, right? And they'll give you incentives and then they'll bet on you. So that's all coming out of Wharton. Like this Center for Health Incentives is not in the medical department, it's in the business department. And so you've got stuff like, Boris Johnson saying, oh, we're a little bit overweight now that we've been all locked in our houses. So maybe, this is an op-ed from Australia, but they're saying, oh, well, if you're a bit overweight, you should maybe walk if you're getting public assistance. You should demonstrate you have like good health behavior.
And
right?
I can just hear all these highfalutin PhDs. Well, yeah, I mean, all these fat people
should be doing the right thing.
Yeah, all these fat people are a big what do you call it? They're going to say they're the ones who are creating all the issues with the hospitals. They have all these.
They would just be healthier, darn it.
They would just be healthier.
Right. Yeah. But at the same time, if you understand that the whole environment is being weaponized with frequencies and nanotechnology, and it's a dual-use military weapon that no one's supposed to know about, even though if you just pause to actually look, it's everywhere. I mean, it's like we're living in two realities. And that's why maybe sometimes it's not so hard for me to imagine like a parallel universe, because sometimes I feel like we're already living in a parallel universe. Like there's no way for me to convey this information to people who refuse to hear it.
There's another question about dirty energy. Someone said, can she explain dirty energy? How dirty energy causes diabetes like they're a high school dropout. So I guess kind of like, I don't know.
Well, part of the stuff I'm still learning it myself. And that's why I don't claim that I'm an expert on all of these things. But sure. I do know that frequencies add to chronic illness and like high tension power lines. And like where I work, we actually are crisscrossed by these high power lines. And so I would appreciate, like, if you look into like dirty energy and diabetes, there's a number of papers about how it works. Like, I don't know exactly the nature of the frequency, but it disrupts cellular function. It disrupts the genetic code. So
I remember when people were protesting 5G and saying it, and everybody was calling people stupid for that.
Right. I mean, it's all about controlling the narrative. But if someone said, oh, by the way, did you know there's a 6G? By the way, did you know that the 6G project is about digital twins? And by the way, they want to turn you and your children into avatars and then have your avatars control you from the digital simulation that's run by the military. Like, I know it sounds crazy. I mean, I actually had some ridiculous person put like a clown face on me and say, like, make fun of me, like last week. And I said, I don't want to be sitting here having to talk about this.
Yeah.
Like, I agree. It sounds like something out of a science fiction book. But the reality is that I don't think you can discount, considering the money and power behind this agenda, that it's just not going to happen, that we should just ignore it and pretend it's not happening. Because anybody of good conscience, I don't see how you can sit quietly by and see it. And that's why I think if you understand this as empire, if you look at the harm that has been done for centuries to Black and brown people in this country, you can't discount it. Why would you think we were any better now? Why would we ever think that Blackstone or Goldman Sachs was any better, that they really cared, or that Kaiser Permanente all of a sudden really cares about your wellness, that the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation really cares? I don't see any evidence. So, okay. So Michael Platt, he's connected with Wharton and Penn Medicine. He, if you imagine the neurosensors, the nanotechnology on your neurons, he's the former president of the Society for Neuroeconomics. All right. So we've already got behavioral economics, and we can gamify it, and now we can get it down to your neurons, right? And if we, again, how are we not having any larger conversations around eugenics and racial justice? And we're going to pursue something along the lines of neuroeconomics. And this guy has been doing work with the National Institutes of Health and the Department of the Defense. And he's been cited 4,000 times. And he's on HBO, right? So, this is...
I'm starting to see a connection for how when they want to do something really big, there's always a connection to Hollywood.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Hollywood is an extension of the military-industrial complex, unfortunately. And this is just a slide. This is the Jerusalem Post. They're talking about the innovation and social impact bonds for diabetes. And if once you understand how broad, and think about asthma, right? Can you imagine putting a whole bunch of nanoparticulates in the air that is not going to exacerbate asthma? I mean, engineered nanoparticles, right? So you have all of these chronic illnesses, right, that are potentially caused by toxic environments. And then you can monitor people for them while you're poisoning them and make them do things to improve their health, even though you know that you're poisoning them. It's like Munchausen syndrome. So they're talking about the impact markets wait a minute, let me just look at it closely. So this is on the left. It's about the diabetes impact bonds with Social Finance Israel. We know that's Ronald Cohen. And then on the right, the impact investing in Israel, because social finance started in London. We know we have one in the US and there's one in Israel. Their assessment of the impact market globally right now is like 500 billion plus. So it's a significant amount of money riding on that, tied to surveillance, tied to getting the data analytics. So this is just touching on, again, like DuPont, this is a war. We don't recognize the weapons. DuPont, like now we don't need gunpowder. We don't need dynamite. We've moved on to the microbiome. This is CV. He is the member of the DuPont Environmental Defense Team to work with product stewardship and in their regulatory around nanotechnology.
Is that why there's such a push to take guns, because people don't need them anymore, or that they think we don't need them anymore?
I mean, if you've got neural weapons, the ultimate goal is like a bloodless coup. I mean, ultimately, that's what Jonathan Moreno spoke of in Mind Wars, his book. It's like the military really just want to disable you with remotely.
Yeah,
they don't even want you to know that you're disabled. That's kind of where it's at. And so if you understand that DuPont is working in the microbiome space, and it's so great because they're working with the EPA to influence the development of profiling, of nanotechnology. Isn't that great? How nice of them to work with the EPA to set the standards for nanotech. But if they're working specifically in the microbiome in the gut, this is what I was saying about the vagus nerve, is at the interface of the microbiota gut-brain axis. So they can control your gut and your brain, and the connection is the vagus nerve. And there's a lot of stuff, even in the wellness space that's looking at using biofeedback and electroceuticals. And you can imagine like what's going to happen when people have negative outcomes from this poisoning, that they're going to be looking for cures, right? And there's one thing to be said for, using frequency. Like I've talked to people who do like sound baths and other frequency things.
I've heard about sound baths.
But that's not an app. That's different from like, let me tune you up into your smartphone. That's different, right? And so people have to be really thoughtful about what they're signing up for when they sign up for alternative, like frequency-based treatments, protocols, as I think. So I'm just kind of clicking through. So this is just going back to patents. Certain people are always talking about patents, but there's a lot of patents out there, and which ones aren't they talking about? This one, my friend Steffers just sent me like right before this came in. This is Charles Lieber. This is from 2017 for injectable nanoscale wires, systems and methods for injectable devices. So they're talking about injections of nanoscale wires, into bodies. Other embodiments are generally directed to systems and methods of making, using, or promoting devices, kits, and other devices. So like, this is a thing. The nanowires are a big thing. If you look at it, if you understand what Giordano says about like dual use technology and the sensors, and if you've ever, if you understand the impacts of these cyber systems on targeted individuals, this is just a diagram from an academic paper talking about neural interfaces and energy harvest, because a lot of this is the battery part is harvesting both our internal functions and our physical movement and mobility into energy, I think, to run this metaverse. They are talking about implantable sensors that can stimulate your body through electricity, optical functions, chemical functions, magnetic functions, and ultrasound. So stimulation can be also harmful and painful and bad. They can transmit data through ultrasound, wired frequency, and radio frequency. So that's the data going out. And I think that's what they're going to use the wearable technologies for. That they can be powered, these sensors, by ultrasound, radio frequency batteries, or energy harvesting. So they can be internally powered or powered remotely. And then what can they sense? They can sense electrical information, pressure, biomarkers, and temperature. So, if you understand this as a cyber torture potential device, I think that we have to take it very seriously. And even though I don't really trust the UN as far as I can throw it, even that said, they had to convene last March a group about torture in which they acknowledged cyber torture. And they say a particular area of concern, which does not appear to have received sufficient attention, is the possible use of various forms of information and communication technology, cyber technology, for the purposes of torture. Although the promotion, protection, and enjoyment of human rights on the internet has repeatedly been addressed, torture has not. So this is Giordano. This is his picture. So like even the UN has to admit cyber torture is a thing, and nanotechnology is a part of it. And these are some messages that were shared with me by one of these individuals who I had their permission. But if you understand, there's a book that I recommend to a lot of people called The Diamond Age, and it's by Neil Stephenson. It was written in 1995, and it's all of this. It's nanobots, it's globalism, it's terraforming, it's frequency. And the premise of this is that they create a primer that is supposed to promote creativity in the granddaughter of this rich venture capitalist. He commissions it. It's essentially an iPad. They don't say it's an iPad because it's 1995, but it's an iPad. And the guy who designed it made a knockoff for his daughter, but then it fell into the hands of this poor child, right? And this is like set in Asia. And the poor child, the idea is that the you hire actors, so like online actors with, if you picture motion capture, like the Disney motion with all the dots, like the animation, that people would have tattoos on them and they would be in ractives, like these immersive realities. And the actor would act and it would be a person's tutor, their digital tutor. And so all of this would happen, and this is like blockchain payment systems that they would be paid like through crypto and based on their performances as an online tutor through this iPad. And this is 1995. And so the poor girl, right, who gets the iPad, it falls into her hands because her brother stole it. She ends up getting connected to a actor who's very emotionally attached, who's like halfway across the world in California. And she ends up like essentially becoming this little girl's mother through the acting, but they call it a actor. So if you understand this idea of smart environments and sensor technology and digital payments, and that like if we're in a play, if they can force people to be in scenarios like in literally the real world as an augmented reality video game against your will, that's like being a actor. And this person talked about like a lot of the work I had done around finance and gamification. They were making sense because they had very specific, this is someone who kind of got like colonized through nanotechnology and fungal spores and things like 6 years ago. But they're very grounded, like they have a spiritual practice, so they can look at things in like a certain way. And so they can use my information and say, okay, this is how this makes sense based on my lived experience. That like this gang stalking, that if you picture a gig economy TaskRabbit where you just go around and harass people, or LARPing, that it's almost like you're in a live action role play, only people may not realize that the person who's being targeted isn't intentionally in the game. They don't want to be in this game. And that the cyber torture is happening both at a cellular level through the frequencies, but also through how you're living in this gaming environment, like through the fusion centers and Department of Homeland Security. So, and this is all being covered up, like embedded in academia, in the entertainment industry, in defense, in, neighborhood watch, in all of these, in the Nest, what is that online neighborhood, neighbors, nosy neighbor kind of thing? Like that. This
I heard about that
out, and that nobody understands it unless you're actually in it. And then you can't get out because they say, oh, well, those people are crazy. How can you say that would happen? You must be unhinged, right? Oh, you're seeing hallucinations? You must have a mental illness. It's not that somebody from MIT is beaming, like using you as a test case to beam programs hallucinations in your head. Why are we not talking about this? It's something we all should be like talking about. It's a lot. So this is this person's lived experience as being a actor in this game. This is the book, The Diamond Age. The Army Research Lab and Hollywood have been working together on simulation work since the late 90s. They held a whole conference about modeling and simulation, linking entertainment and defense. And then that Institute for Creative Technologies at USC came out of that. And that was Disney and the military. And so, oh, look, here we have Lincoln again. I'm going to play this short clip about digital twinnings and managing your identity. And it's really important to know when he talks about identity management, that Salt Lake City, he's based in the greater Salt Lake City area, is the home of Evernym. And Evernym is what they're using for the blockchain digital identity. And also in that region is Instructure and Canvas, which is being used for a lot of online education. So managing
Canvas, oh my God.
Yeah, so Canvas and Instructure are all connected, and Evernym. So I went around, like when I visited Salt Lake City in January, and I like burned sage at all of these places and said, we're not down with this, we're not down with this. So listen to what he says. Again, he's coming from, I think, a certainly fringe element of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but I would anticipate, knowing the investments of the church, that he is probably connected to some influential people.
All right, I'll make it big.
And the copies could go on to have individuating experiences and separate identities, and maybe you're already a copy of God that individuated. So it's not clear that there's anything inherently bad about the possibility of copies, but it's also clear that that could be abused, and so maybe there should be laws Maybe there are laws among the gods about how to manage the preservation of identity. And that reminds me of things that Brigham Young talked about on a regular basis. He actually said that eternal life is the power to maintain your identity. And so maybe he was on to something.
All right, what do you think of that? I mean, if you understand it as a blockchain ledger that you're living, like the piece I didn't share here is like before. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, I'm on mute.
No, that's okay.
I was trying to ask you to play it again really quickly.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, sure.
And the copies could go on to have individuating experiences and separate identities. And maybe you're already a copy of God that individuated. So it's not clear that there's anything inherently bad about the possibility of copies, but it's also clear that that could be abused. And so maybe there should be laws. Maybe there are laws among the gods about how to manage the preservation of identity. And that reminds me of things that Brigham Young talked about on a regular basis. He actually said that eternal life is the power to maintain your identity. And so maybe he was on to something.
Right?
Yeah.
So once you understand Salt Lake City, once you understand optogenetics, bioengineering, digital twinning, virtual objects, I mean, essentially what he said earlier in another clip that I didn't play, but was that they're tasked with the idea of transfiguration, and that will be done through family history, very detailed, and there will be like a quantum archaeologist, which really is digital twinning is what he's talking about, and that they will like resurrect the dead. I mean, this talk is about resurrecting the dead. And once you understand Ancestry.com and the bio code, is that literally, I think he is, but he's talking about making multiple copies. And then you think about that within the context of like labor organizing, right? You know, like, and then the other piece of this is like, if you imagine that they're trying to break this code, what if they can create, like, to speed it up, they just make infinite digital twins of people and then run that data scenario, right? Like maybe they run you in every different combination of every different choice of every, like there's this Hugh Everett, the many worlds theory, and they run them all at once to try to crack the code. You know, there's 100 Zacchaeus out there, all doing slightly different things to get slightly different data to feed into this equation. I don't know. I mean, I think when he's talking about this in the context of knowing what is going on with Evernym, you know, it's worth thinking about. So, like, I know we're already at like 3 hours. I'm never. Let me see if there's anything particularly good in here that I can go through. Oh, no, stop. Okay. Oh, maybe we're getting close to being done. I think we're getting close. So this is just my. I will share the slides with you. This is my bigger infographic about how I think this is going to go. The ultimate goal is this full spectrum dominance. They're doing it through cybernetics. A big piece of this is the World Economic Forum in the UN managing people through the pandemic and the One Health and the climate crisis and the poverty. They're controlling the narrative. They're fragmenting society. They're making people afraid and isolated.
Wait a minute. Perpetual pandemic. God damn.
I mean, that's the plan. I mean, the World Bank has a whole One Health initiative that is essentially saying people need to stay out of nature because we harm nature and nature harms us and gives us terrible pandemics and we're a blight on the earth. So we should totally disconnect with nature and live in our pod so we can be in the matrix. And then they have whole financial apparatuses tied to this One Health structure that is a financialization structure, which again, I thought was the top of the pyramid was the financialization and the biosurveillance. But really, the whole biosurveillance and financialization is simply feeding the AI to crack the code at this point. I don't know if there's something bigger than that. I guess we'll have to hold on and see. But at this point, I think the top of the pyramid is to get the data, the biosensor data to crack the code. And to do that, they create crises that allow them to create these financial deals and a biosecurity state and social control mechanisms. And that's all happening through the infrastructure of the sensor networks and the software of life and your digital identity. We have virology, which is the invisible enemy that obscures the whole conversation around nano and neuro weapons. So, how many people out there are talking about nanotechnology? A very, very small proportion of the resistance is talking about nanotech and neuro weapons. The digital twinning is happening. It's going to happen through your electronic health record and the biosensor data. So Zeke Emanuel, the ACA, that's what he got set up with these electronic health records. That's going to be blockchain. When Giordano says we need to have precise information about you and to be able to unpack it, that's exactly what he's talking about. He's talking about Zeke Emanuel and the ACA setting that up. Medicare for all, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a digital twin and a bunch of biosensors. And the impact investing is, again, more and more money and power to the hedge funds on the ledger, everything tracked on the ledger tied to these environmental, social governance structures. It's global capitalism gone crazy. And then the end product is this idea of a centaur, and green energy, that we are the green energy, really, in the batteries. Oh, I think this is it. Okay. Yes, this is the last slide. Okay, so this is a good end. Yay, that's not so bad. So this was a tweet I did, I don't know, a couple weeks ago.
This is depressing. That last slide, god damn. Can you go back to that slide?
You want a little depressing? Okay.
This is, this is it. Like, full spectrum domination. Like, I just need people to sit with that.
And that's a military term. They call it that. They call it that. And total information awareness. That's the other one I didn't put on there, but that's the biosensor data.
And then the UN and the W. So what's the UN's part? You talked about the World Economic Forum's part, but I want people that's listening to really, I feel like we need to spend a little bit more time on this slide to really unpack it. I'm serious, man, because this is
it's 11 o'clock. Are you sure people want to still hang out with us after 3 hours?
We still got almost 50 people in here. They hanging. This is crazy. It's like 50 people on a Friday night still here after 3 hours.
But like, Zakia, just imagine if people, no offense to either of us, but like, we're small fish in this big pond, right? Imagine the people who are like much bigger players in this, like in the resistance movement, if they wrap their head around this and talk to people about it, it would be game changing. It would be game changing, but it's really hard to get there. And that's part of the construct, I will say, of like the whole alt media space is it's a business for a lot of people. And, they feed you out little stories and they're interesting stories. I'll give them that.
I was going to say, I didn't see the media on this slide. They're clearly an arm of the state. It's so clear to me now, I don't know what to do.
Well, that's
media is the narrative. Oh, I do see that media programming. There you go. Yeah.
But even the alt media, like even the alt media, even the stuff that like.
You talking about like Alex Jones?
I'm talking about, how many other, there are people out there who are talking about transhumanism. I think they don't go into this level of detail. There are still people who are a lot on the fence about what blockchain is really about. I don't really know of anybody talking about the spatial web or impact.
You're the only one that's talking about all this shit. I'm telling you, like, even Ralph Smart don't be talking about the spatial web.
Raul did it, and if he created a website, Silicon Icarus, and then they tried to. He's doing some really good work now that it's still bubbling up, but that he was the only person who, with any sort of media's presence, who would pick up that story and talk about Pay for Success, talk about Ronald Cohen, and that isn't even the end game now. Now I see the end game as a whole nother layer of the nanotech. But if you go out and start saying, wait a minute, this isn't gain of function, this is nano frequency weapons, and we need to be pulling out Charles Lieber again, and we need to look into MITRE and the military technology.
So Fauci was right when he told Rand Paul he didn't know what he was talking about.
Well, then you have to wonder, all these people who are pushing this, right? It's like ops within ops within ops within ops. And it's very confusing, and it's meant to be confusing. And, I'm not here to say you should trust me.
There's a black elder. His name is Neely Fuller. And he said, what's the quote by Neely Fuller about white supremacy? Everything you think you understand, you don't, or something is, and the N word is confusion. That the last word is confusion. This is crazy.
I mean, and I'm not here to say I know all of the things, but like I work with good people we're trying to figure stuff out in a way that makes sense and synthesize new information and fit it in and readjust. And this is what we've got so far. And this is pretty comprehensive. So
they want us to believe that poor white people in West Virginia with a Confederate flag is white supremacy. This is white supremacy.
It is. I know.
God damn.
But the problem is like in cities like Philadelphia, whether or not they fully get it, it's Black Democrats that are pushing this in my city.
I know. And then DC
and within the narrative, it makes it almost impossible for me to go anywhere and try to explain it, because then I just get shoved off. Shut up, lady, sit in the corner and listen to. And I'm like, but I actually, like, the people who represent the empire need to be able to like own their shit too and tell it. They have part of the story. I mean, I'm not here to speak to anyone else's lived experience other than I have a really good intel set on what I think is coming based on my analysis of what I know, which again isn't everything, but it's a lot more, and it's synthesized. That's the piece, is that a lot of people are not fully synthesizing it. And I think that but when you see it like that, then you realize everyone has to unify, because
this is so powerful, Alison. I can't tell you. I guess I'm a visual person, and like everything that you talked about, like for this 3 hours, you've summed up in this thing. Like I'm actually just gonna take a picture of it because this is crazy. Yeah, let me just.
Yeah. I don't want it to be this.
I mean, and I get it. Like the media is really going with it. Just trust the experts. Fuck that. That's not even in me. The experts. Y'all don't even know. I listened to a doctor on TV yesterday. I was in a restaurant because, you know, we don't have TV at home. And I was in a restaurant. Lord have mercy, I got my earrings. Okay. I was in a restaurant and this doctor was on TV. And the question was asked, well, you know, again, I keep going back to the vaccine. Well, you know, is the vaccine going to work against all the different variants? So that goes back to the perpetual pandemic. I already see this bullshit. And well, we're looking at the data now, and you know, we're really just, you know, kind of like just checking everything out. Like I couldn't believe she was on the news. She made no sense. And I'm like, these are the people they want us to believe? And is she an expert? She was mumbling all over herself.
But I would say, like, again, even in the resistance, like there are movements to say, look, here are our white coats. Here are the good white coats, right? All these white coat people are on our side, right? And I'm saying, I don't know, like if you're coming out of the white coat space, I don't know if you should be the people up in front leading the resistance, because clearly you have a certain frame that, like, if it is what I believe it is, which is, and this infographic doesn't really even have the nano in it, because this is what I did before I fully grasped all of the nano. I mean, I have one line, but I have a much better handle.
Yeah, it says bio nanotech and infrastructure.
But like that would be I would probably have a whole nano thing at this point, like a whole nother circle. How many of those folks do you think are electrical engineers?
Right.
Just because you know the body doesn't mean you know electrical engineering. And so if you think the problem is in the body, you're going to have a totally wrong solution if really what's going on is that your body is being poisoned by tiny micro machines.
Yeah, damn.
That's not even the thing. Like you're not an expert in that. You can have a white coat on, but like, unless we actually have some people who know how to detox from nanotechnology and frequency weapons, like I would hear from them. But if we keep perseverating on people who know just the body, then that's saying, oh, well, then we understand it as something that it may very well not actually be. And I think, you know, if you start to look into graphene, you know, it's in everything. It's the wonder material. It is the new universe. It is the metaverse. It is the flat two-dimensional world. It is hydrogel. It is turning robots into people and people into robots. We should all be talking about the biodigital convergence. I mean, I am seeing a lot more people in my circles sharing the material. And even where I was, 4 months ago, the Internet of Bodies, I was still thinking you were going to have to put on a shirt. Well, I think you're going to have to put on a smart shirt for a while. I guess I didn't actually end up getting that in. I had a thing from Rice University. I had the Tesla phoresis, which is the self-assembling wires. But the other piece that I didn't get the slide in on, but I have it on my Twitter and my Facebook, is that they're using lasers to turn anything into graphene, anything carbon, I think, into graphene. And what they were doing was they're saying that, and it's electrically conductive. So they're like, we can turn anything into a trackable thing, like cardboard boxes. Now we can scan them and they're electrically conductive. We can put it on a potato. We can barcode your potato with graphene. Like it burns the carbon into graphene with a laser. We can put it on a coconut. We can put it on all your food. We can put it on all your boxes. We can turn fancy chocolates into graphene. We can turn anything into graphene. Like when we die, they're going to turn us into graphene, I bet. Like they'll be like, hey, good, we can just recycle you. It's a circular economy. Like I think it's the cradle to cradle economy. We'll just zap you with the laser and turn you into graphene. And I don't know if this is Lot's wife and salt, is this the next version as we get turned into graphene? But one of the things they were talking about was using the laser to actually print onto commercial grade plastic film. So I've never understood, because a lot of this is based in Texas. A lot of these operatives, even in the ed tech space, were always like ExxonMobil. They were Big Oil. They were Enron. They were John Arnold. I'm like, what is the connection? Are they just trying to figure out where to invest after peak oil? Well, they already knew it was going to be nanotech. They're lasering graphene onto commercial grade plastic and making electronics and saying, look, it's so bendable. We were trying to have a hard time figuring out how to fabricate this stuff at scale. Now we can with our fancy lasers. We can put them in anything, in shoes, in clothing, and then they're going to harvest the piezoelectric energy. They're literally going to turn your clothes and your body and everything into a prison. And then maybe they'll insert you in a programmable hallucination so that you don't know. I don't know. But wrinkle in time, they say love wins. We can't just be like, ugh, because it's so over the top. Clearly there are big points at which this is going to fail. This is a lot. This is a lot that all has to go right for them to accomplish what they're going to accomplish. And to me, I feel really strongly that if the Black community in the United States could get some clarity about what this actually was, that would be the game changer. And then,
in what way?
If we could understand, so you asked about what the United Nations role was. So that's all the Sustainable Development Goals. 2/3 of those goals are about poverty management. 2/3 of them are about, only 5 of them are about.
They don't want to eradicate poverty, just to manage it.
Manage it with the.
That's all they've been doing all these damn years.
Exactly, but nano management, poverty nano management, right? So that's what's coming. And if, I said last May when Jason came to interview me, my very first online thing, I'm like, it's marinage. That is the model. Is how, and then how does one do that with one's mind? Because then there is the Africa-India part, the meditation, the spiritual connection. I had a friend who was telling me about that, and they want to colonize all of that. So what are those lessons? And then is there a way, because all of this is going to happen through the impact markets, through social determinants of health equity, closing the digital divide, giving people career and technical opportunities, lifelong learning, mental health training, resilience and grit, and all of the things we know. If you can flip it and know everything is inverted, you'll get that it's just a continuation of the dominating principle. But then if there was a way to communicate that dominating principle and the history of where it came from, because nobody wants that for their kids, right? And now it's all of us. And they want us all in our little boxes so that we're all saying, well, can I have my scraps under the dome? No, because you can't have any scraps in the nanobiosensor world. Like, it all has to be flipped. Like, we have to flip the whole thing, but not from a selfish point, from a point of like reckoning and making it right. Outside of global supply chains, you know, outside of the military, it's a global peace movement. But not from the industrial complex, not from the nonprofit industrial complex, not from a think tank, not from the churches, because they're all embedded in it now. But I think it can happen. I mean, like I said, I get 100 people following me a day at Collect a Group. And I try to say it real, what I think. I don't hold back. And people still keep showing up.
Geofencing. What the hell? What is that?
Well, so, I mean, it's your Google map. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's essentially it's rule from space. That's why I'm saying borders don't matter anymore. They're going to make up your arbitrary borders. So if you're with wearable technology, because everyone will have to be trackable, whether that tracking is happening with your phone or your smart shirt or your neural implant, engineered nanoparticles, like, it's supply chain tracking. And now we are an integral part of the supply chain. Human life, we are product. Just like when we talked about blockchain Cardano tracking coffee beans in Ethiopia for quality assurance purposes. Same thing, people, quality assurance purposes. That's what Giordano's talking about. And so that's all done from space. That's macro eyes, that's Israel. That's, they were tracking vaccine uptake or whatever, the Harvard Business Review. But it's they can confine you. They could say, I'm sorry, if you go out your 5-mile zone, your digital currency doesn't work. Your biosensor is connected to your smart toilet and your new data analytics says that you need to be in quarantine for 2 weeks. Your smart door lock doesn't open. That's like the smart contract geofencing. Oh, you can't cross the state border. To get across the state border, you all have to have an easy pass and it won't work. Your car stalls out, your Internet of Things car won't go across the state border if you're not allowed. That's the geofencing. So that's why, like, they want you to live through the robot or through the avatar so you can all compete in this globalization 4.0. But in that, we are actually all unified because nobody wants that for their kids. And we shouldn't be harming, participating in a way that harms kids in, Indonesia, Bangladesh. Like, we're all going to be harmed. And it's all happening through the geofencing. But, that's Google Maps. It was real convenient until it wasn't.
Right. It always starts off, oh, this is so convenient. And I remember when Google Maps was first a thing, I remember thinking to myself, how the hell do they map all the streets in the world? But when you say they're doing it from space.
Well, yeah. I mean, I actually, in my other slide deck, I have something from, I think it was MITRE Corporation might have been involved in the Jason project, which are like the super top secret scientists who know all the tricks that no one else is allowed to talk about. Like all the secret science that that those circles know and that no one else is allowed to know about. But they like back, it was early 2000s, or maybe even late 1990s, they were saying that they wanted to map every structure on the Earth. And it was maybe 10 years before Keyhole, which became Google Earth, happened. I mean, this is what I've got now, but their tech is 20 years ahead of what we actually know. None of this is secret. None of the stuff I put on there, somebody gave me a tip. This is just all me looking around at people's LinkedIn profiles and YouTube videos and stuff and putting it together. But, all right, I'll go to, did you see anything else? I mean, the genomic
mechanical consciousness, that struck me. And also biopowered planetary computer.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of the matrix part of things, is harvesting your physical energy. Like, here, I'll put you in some smart shoes. And remember, I think I mentioned to you a bit ago, my concern around like the money that was pouring into wellness clubs and fitness, like informal fitness clubs for Black women. And, you know, and not that I begrudge that, people being together, socializing, having that mutual support. But if it starts to come with like smart shoes and smart, you know, sensors and leaderboards and, you know, controlling people's food and things like that, that worries me. But, you know, once you have the smart technology, they can harvest that piezoelectric energy. Initially, they just say for your wearables, like you'll just power your own wearables walking around. But I think the other piece is that the pineal gland, sort of your seat of your consciousness and spirit, that they are talking about it calcifying, and that there's pineal in your pineal gland, that there's piezoelectric energy in that. And so part of it is, I think, I worry in the media space, the shock value that we see in terms of visual imagery of just shocking images and shocking content.
That's why we got rid of TV.
Is that shock is like that there's probably a neuron element in that actually that they can harvest for the energy as well. And so if you're consuming this content, it's programming you, but it's also like there's a parasitic aspect of like harvesting the energy out of your emotion as well. So it's your physical movement and your emotional activity, which is crazy. And the thing I do want to mention about genomic targeting, because a lot of this is bioinformatics about people's genomic structure and talking about epigenetic trauma, which is certainly a key issue, is that they are going to use that in the social determinants of health to predictively profile people and then genetically engineer them. And the framing will all be like, oh, well, we'll take care of all of your genomic problems, you know, that are specific to you as the Black community, because now we have precision data. We can offer you a precision treatment for all that is, you know, wrong with you. And you know, part of that is a larger ethical conversation. I have an acquaintance I've made who was born with cerebral palsy and is an activist in disability rights, and is someone who is really upset with the idea that she should be fixed. And she's like, I am me. I was born the way I was born because that is my destiny, and I don't want to be fixed. I'm not a thing to be fixed. I'm me. I should be respected and validated in all of the beauty that is me, who I am now, not as something that you think that you can impose a fix on me. That is inappropriate. And so I think as we understand these engineering sequences, what are we fixing something to, right? Who gets to decide what the fix is and what the model is, what the model Black American should be?
Yeah.
Literally in the utility fog in that book, they were talking about skin tone with nano robots. They could change your color.
Can you imagine the self-hating Black people that will immediately make themselves white? I knew it. Oh, I knew that part. As soon as I started hearing about genomics,
And hair.
And hair. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, ain't gonna be no 4C hair no more. But yeah, like, oh God.
It's hard. And what's really crazy about it is that, and again, this is conjectural, but this is how they're anticipating. And they said health and beauty will be first, cosmetics, because it's, you know, a pretty easy thing to do and it will be very profitable. And, you know, I've said my father worked for Procter & Gamble for, you know, his whole career, and he retired right before the Internet of Things got started, that P&G started the Internet of Things. But at that time, like towards the end of his career, they were pivoting out of all the products that I grew up with, like the Jif and Pam, you know, all of these things, into health and beauty. That was their focus, was health and beauty. And it seemed odd to me to think, like, how could there be so much money in, like, because this isn't high-end cosmetics. This is, you know, like stuff you get at the drugstore, but which will probably also all be embedded with graphene and nanoparticles, by the way. I mean, I can't prove it, but I would suspect.
Do you know the skin lightening industry in Africa and parts of the Caribbean is like through the roof? I just learned about that.
Wow.
The other thing that you definitely probably don't know about this, but like I just learned about it from social media, but there is apparently this huge community of African American women who are traveling to places like Brazil to get butt implants. It's like a multi-billion-dollar industry. And like I knew like certain like hip hop entertainers like had butt implants. I think Cardi B is one of them. Like I knew about that, but I didn't realize it was such a big industry. It's so big now, Alison, that hotels in Miami and certain places in the country, like when they're coming back in from Brazil, they've had to like create notices like don't you can't they're like the seeping, I guess, from the butt implant is like creating havoc in hotels.
Wow.
I mean, so I'm thinking about
like
all of
nano
this.
robotics. If you understand how people are being manipulated in social media to both digitize themselves, to put overlays on their faces, to morph into an avatar.
Oh God, we did that.
Like the Snapchat stuff. Like literally in 1996, they were saying that they envision a future. Now, again, whether they can accomplish this or not, but they are imagining creating markets for a future where you have nano machines that can literally remake you from the inside out into your whatever you think your preferred self, like at a nano level. Like the avatars are conditioning us to be like, oh, you want to be like this one week and not the next week, or you can just like then you lose all reality. I mean, you don't even know who you are anymore. You're just unmoored. And there was a book for young adults that was really pretty powerful by M.T. Anderson called Feed. And it is all of this, really. It is this sort of near future dystopia. But a big part of it was body modification, like instantaneous, significant body modification. And again, but this was like to the point of like people carving eyes all over their body, and the next week being something total, like it was it was very intense. It was not just like people having body ornamentation or stuff like that. It was like
enlightening and
casual, cheap clothes, but with significant physical changes to people's body.
So I said all that to say, but people are already kind of primed for this. Like, can you imagine some mad scientist coming and saying, you don't even have to like do all of that.
Oh, yeah.
You can just do this. Like, oh God. People are already primed for all of this, Alison. I think that's what's sitting with me right now. Like the priming has already happened.
Yeah.
And that's psychology. Like they've studied human beings enough to know psychologically that there's certain steps you have to take, and they're very patient. Like these people are
they have a long time horizon. Like I said, like you look at this stuff, you're like, oh, they were doing nanotech in 1992.
Right.
I mean, and the cybernetics. I mean, that's the thing. It's the steering. They know how to steer people.
They're steering. It's like you said, it's the bioeconomic.
You get a little bit out of line and then they just nudge you back. I mean, that's the thing. It's like how quietly can they move you so that you don't quite notice and push back? Because if they push you too hard, you're going to startle. They just need to just nudge you.
Well, I feel like we're all in an experiment right now. Like I'm looking at like how I listened to Biden yesterday, and I was
don't do that. He didn't get the good nanobots.
He was like, very he came up like very relatable. Oh, he's like a grandpa. Of course he's not lying to us. He loves us.
Yeah. He's the face of the empire. Nobody wants to believe that we're the empire. That's the problem.
I listened to him and I was like, I see right through it, but I was looking at it like
someone else,
like people. There are people who are looking at this, and they're people that I love that are in my family, and they believe this shit. They believe it.
Yeah, I know.
10 years ago, I would have believed it, Alison. I told you about how
we must be in the like some other alternate group of the experiment. I keep wondering, like, how is it so obvious to some of us, but
how is it so right? I have wondered that myself. Like, I've always kind of had somewhat of I hate to say it, but like somewhat of a sixth sense. Like, even when I wasn't like, as I wouldn't say I'm fully aware now, I'm still growing clearly. But like, I think about who I told you, we talked about this on the phone yesterday. I think about like who I was like 10 years ago. And like one of the things that Facebook does is give you those Facebook memories. And it was showing me some of my posts from like 11 years ago. And I was like, oh my God, like I am nothing like that person. I mean, not that I was a bad person, but what I'm saying is like I was one of those people. Like it was when Obama ran, you should have saw me sitting with my 3-year-old son, just sitting in front of the computer, just sitting in front of the TV crying. And like now, I see him as like the devil. Like
I knocked doors for Michael Nutter, who's like,
oh my God. I mean, like.
I know you don't know until
we must be some kind of we're what part of the experiment are we? Because I see right through all of this shit, and it's so frustrating, Alison, being around friends, being around family members, and they just be looking like, and I just be like, oh, never mind, that's okay.
We left the cave, Zakia. That's the problem. We wandered out of the cave.
Like this, never mind.
I mean, yeah. But see, the thing is, I mean, and that's the thing for me is that like whatever time we have, it's like I could be having a much more boring middle. I mean, I don't wish this harm on anybody, but like I've met fascinating people, smart, curious people. I've learned like I'm a much more developed person, and all of this stuff not happened to me. I mean, I was growing pretty, along with my research, but, we do have this connection, this network. And so I feel like we're here for a purpose. Like, I don't feel like there's no point in it. I think that there definitely is a point in what we're doing. And part of it is like having to unlearn the like conditioning of like that we always have the plan and we have the next steps. Cause like sometimes you just don't. You try to do your best, like, we connect. It's like, oh, well, can we do this tonight? Well, sure, we'll do it. So you do your best with the next thing as it presents, and then you wait for the next thing, and then you go with it because I think there is a higher power. I mean, there is.
I believe there's a higher power too. That's why I don't think like the coup of God. That to me, I feel like is not gonna happen, because I do believe that I guess I'll say I have to kind of like, have that optimism, because I don't think they'll be able to really get through with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's attempted. I think that's.
I do think they're working on it now. I can like every time I talk to you, something comes up, and I'm like, oh, this is it. Like beginning of this conversation, I was telling you like. My Samsung Health app, like that's a thing. Like that's a part of this.
Yeah.
Counting my steps.
Yep.
And it's so funny because psychologically, you can ask my husband, if I don't get to my limit, it'll be 10 o'clock at night. And I'm like, oh, I've got to run out and get the rest of my steps so that I can meet my goal.
But see, the thing is, like, I knew that like when my friend Emily was a teacher in Maine, her co-teacher had brought in a program. This is like maybe 5 or 6 years ago to this small school with UNICEF. And it was the thing with the kids had Fitbits. And if they met their count, that UNICEF gave a packet of food to a starving kid somewhere in some other country. And
see, they've been doing this shit in other countries.
But the thing is, in that, it's an impact market, and it's both ways. So you've got the fitness for the kid in the global north, and you've got the hunger, which is goal 2 for the kid in the global south. You're working both impact markets, but you're also conditioning this 7-year-old child that's what you have to do to live in this world. That's the way the world works, is that you have to obey, you have to meet the leaderboard count. And like one little boy went up and just, said to my friend, but miss, what if they have the food, why don't they just give it to the kids?
Right.
The kids know. It's a messed up situation. Get out of the dome. We got to get out of this dome. Like, if not for us, for them. And those Fitbits were targeted. I can't remember the name. UNICEF. I don't know, Kid Power or something like that. They were marketed with Star Wars and Target. Like, they had all the cross promotional tie-ins. They know how to push everybody's buttons.
Well, militarized evolution and eugenics, that's it. Well, I guess we can move on so I can let you go. You had a long day, but this is
come go to bed soon.
This slide, that slide was just, yeah.
Okay, I think it made its rounds. I sent it out on Telegram. So this is just my closing, but like, we just have to get some clarity. Like, do we believe that there are deadly viruses, that viruses will kill massive amounts of people? And actually, if you look at the bioweapons history, viruses, not chemical warfare, which we know, if you look, like I read like these papers, there's really isn't evidence for mass death from a bioweapon. Ton of money going into it, ton of money that could be used to like house people and fund schools and everything. But that's
a ton of money going into what specifically though? Bioweapons?
Bioweapons, yeah. Fort Detrick, all these things, gain of function. There's money going into all this stuff. What is it actually doing? Okay. Do they believe that they're doing that? Because they haven't actually done it, Do we believe in deadly environmental toxins? That's the contrast. So do we know about nano and frequency being weaponized? Do people know about this Internet of Bio-Nano things? And do we understand it as digital empire? And just whenever you consume media about what's going on right now, just kind of walk through that. Am I in the deadly virus camp? Am I in the environmental toxin camp? Are any of these people talking about stuff like nano or Internet of Bio-Nano things or empire? Like, I don't really know many people talking about this in the resistance community who talk about it as an imperial project. But it is, in my mind, it's very clearly an imperial project if you understand it from the impact investing side and the humanitarian aid side and the colonizer side. And then we just have to be clear. And then I think once we get clear, then we are very powerful. They would not be spending all of these resources to control us if we weren't powerful. Like, I'm still committed to that. There are labs. I will say there are bioweapons labs for sure.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But the question is, what are they actually doing? Because if you look for mass death based on a bioweapon, as far as I can tell, like, it hasn't happened. And you have a little anthrax, you have these little pop-up, but I was looking at it because I was curious. I'm like, they talk about the Middle Ages throwing bodies down wells and poisoning water and some stuff like that. But I don't know. I think part of this process is unlearning a lot of things that we were told were one way and we're actually not that way at all.
We've been lied to. The whole education system is a big lie. Dumbing down. That's the other thing. They've intentionally dumbed down people, and a lot of the education is all about conformity.
Yeah.
And not about critical thinking.
Yep.
There's a question here. It says, changing our nature is part of our nature. Is there a limit? It should exist. I don't know. It should exist a limit. I don't know what that means. But
maybe like transhumanism.
Says changing our nature is part of our nature. Is there a limit? I don't
part of it is consent and power systems. So I think that the changing of the nature, if that was meant around transhumanism or human plus or that sort of thing, I would say that this is a forced evolution right now, because it's not people. This campaign is advancing covertly largely, and there is not any robust public discussion of saying, like, do we want to live in a humanoid robot? Like, do we want to live as an avatar? Do we the media is guiding us into this future, but there are not conversations happening in faith communities and academic communities and civic to say, like, is this what we want? And do we understand the implications? Do we know who's actually in control of this thing? If the metaverse is run by the CIA, do we want to evolve to live in the metaverse? Like, if we understand the power differential, because I would say the masses are not in control of the technologies that are fundamental to the transhumanist program. So that's sort of where I'm at this point is, if there were a way for the human plus transhumanists to do their thing without weaponizing the entire world and making it impossible for people to not live that way, I would be more open-minded about it. But at this point, because the internet of bio-nano things is happening at a nano level that is ubiquitous computing, there isn't any room to say, like, well, can you leave us a continent over here where we don't have to do that thing? Because some of us don't want to do that. That's not going to be an option. It's going to be all or nothing in my mind. At least with the internet of bio-nano things, maybe biohacking or some smaller things you could get away with. But as far as like utility fog, for sure, that's that. I don't see it as a small contained area.
What do you think is going to happen next? I mean, when you say a permanent pandemic, I see that already.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess the question is, will people continue to buy it? I mean, even in my household, I sat at the table and I said, so when this happens again in the fall, will you believe me?
Wow.
And it's like, well, maybe, no, but there's this non-committal, like, and I'm like, because it's going to happen again in the fall, right? Like, it is a booster program. It's an ongoing program. This has never happened before. And I come at this like I was not in the health space. I have a lot of regrets looking back at what I didn't know, but you don't know till you do. So then try to do better.
Do you think there will be more lockdowns?
Oh, yeah. It's all geofencing. I mean, that's what it'll be. I mean, ultimately the lockdown will be like, what does your biosensor say when you wake up? I mean, I knew that from a year ago, April, when the head of the Kansas City Fed said we needed daily testing, when there were no tests.
Did you hear Biden say that for the federal employees who refuse to get the shot, that they'll have to, in order to keep their jobs, they have to get tested twice a week, and they have to be basically segregated at work? These people are literally doing legal segregation again, but it's not race, it's this.
Yeah. Because it's the new economic paradigm. I mean, it's changing, and and I think that's what's so frustrating for me, is that in this moment when it actually, like, principled unity, like from an understanding of what actually happened, like, that's what we most need. But the lines have been drawn and people have been so broken apart that, like, I mean, even today, somebody had a post about, like, telling all the parents they needed to go to the school board to talk about critical race theory and sex education. And I said, well, if you're not talking about educational technology, surveillance, and data mining, mental health, and, like, I don't want to hear about that. Because, like, what they're doing is they're sending people to break up communities more apart. You know what I mean? They're saying, oh, your problem is that you're doing critical race theory in school. And not that, like, oh, by the way, did we not tell you that the nanobots are taking over all the children? And it's just like slavery, right? Like, and now it's everybody. Like, that would be a different frame. That would be a powerful counterbalance to that. But now they can say, They can have some people be like, I'm so miffed that these parents are coming in saying this stuff about, and then the other parent, and then you've just got everybody entrenched in this issue that, I mean, I'm not saying the issue of race isn't a huge issue in education, but in this moment, I don't think that's how I would frame it. Like, I mean, and I'm not trying to be dismissive, but like, what are you fighting for? You're fighting to keep these schools that are going to put your kids in VR headsets? I don't know. I mean, I just wish there was a way of having more complex discussions about it. But we're not meant to do that in public school, unfortunately. And then even in homeschool and unschool, they're going to have everybody on a digital voucher.
A digital voucher that does what?
Well, that will give you money to pay for your online education and your skills badges, to rent your VR headset, to buy your synthetic programmable hallucinations to take care of your mental health unsteadiness of living under empire. I don't know.
I was wondering it was going to do another lockdown of like, you know, like last year where it was, I mean, like we didn't have like the same level of lockdowns that they had in Europe, like in Australia. Those were, yeah.
Well, they're the model. They're the model for the impact bonds. They're a prison continent. I mean, that's their history, right? I mean, They have the whole indigenous element, but they were, populated by, prisoners. So yeah, they're, Anyway, well, I probably should sign off because eventually my husband's going to want to come to bed and I'm taking over the bedroom.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost midnight, but
yeah, it is almost midnight. This was great. Again, I mean, thank you. I
don't want to have to talk about this. I would love to be wrong. I would love for someone other than to say, I don't want to engage in this material, like just like show me how it's, I don't think it's really all going to happen the way they say. But I think people need to wake up and treat the information seriously. And I really do think that the focus now needs to be on the nanotech. Because it's clear it was never about one illness.
That was clear, I think, in the beginning for me. That was like, I'm like, because, I listened to Ralph Smart and even he said that he was like, this is going to be a perpetual, there's like, it's going to be a pandemic all the time.
Yep. That's how the World Bank wants it. And UNICEF. Data harvest, and then they're gonna blame people, humans, and say, well, you guys are keeping the pandemic going because you don't want to wear your mask and you don't want to get the shot, so perpetual pandemic. But it was always designed that way. Yeah, but I would say I believe it is a neuro nano weapon.
A nano weapon.
Yeah, our nano neural weapon. Yeah. I mean, that Giordano talks about that. Like literally there's a Department of Homeland Security paper that talks about, like they have a whole column. I just tweeted it today. It's from 2017 talking about nanoparticles and using them for like, I don't know, hemorrhagic something or other targeted at a population level. Like that's our government. That's just a paper that's on the internet. I mean, I'd say you should believe them and then hold them accountable.
How do we, this is my last question, I promise, because I want to let you go, but this is just so much. I'm going to probably go back and watch this again myself. How do people, like the people in this that are listening to us, how do we do non-compliance with this?
Well, it might sound kind of goofy for me. I can't tell anybody else what to do. Like I don't.
Sure. yeah.
Like I'll tell you what I do. So I try to explain to people what's happening in various forms, and I try to keep knowing and refining my analysis so I can be clear, because I think your own personal clarity means a lot, and your ability to assert that out into the world with integrity means a lot. Like I think energetically, try to keep up, feel that we are confident that we can prevail in this. feel like project not like, oh, everybody's dead, I feel terrible. That's not helpful. And I'm not saying just be mamby-pamby about it, but like project confidence, get clear, understand that if these crazy jokers know that there's some other extra dimensional thing that they're manipulating, that's our birthright too. And the way we access it or get to it is probably different than they do, but it's out there. So we have to reach into that. We have to like step into our lives and try to find it. And one of the things I've been doing like for the past year is, I have these like little intention setting, because part of it is setting, like I'm in this historic landscape of myths and wretchedness and wrongness. And I try to go fix things. And so when I get invited places and I'll do these little ceremonies and I'll say, I see this thing, this thing happen. I'm trying to acknowledge this harm and, transmute it in some way. And like literally 3 days ago, I went to Midvale Steel, which is Nicetown, Tioga, like 15 minutes from my house. And it's where Friedrich Wilhelm Taylor developed Taylorism, the scientific management, like the production line. And it was actually, Midvale Steel was one of the only industries that was integrated. So this was the place, of course, the guy goes to say, you're too lazy. How do we get more work out of y'all, right? And so I went there. It's now the SEPTA, the transit yard, and it's kind of all overgrown and it's like a junkyard. But I took like an hourglass from my boggle game and a Ben Franklin pin, because it's all his stupid industriousness and pen and everything, and my dandelions. And I read John Trudell's book, We Are Power, on a Facebook Live. And I laid it all out and I buried Ben Franklin and I broke the darn hourglass. And I said, we're done with this. And so it's sort of saying, we see this history, we're seeing it, we're not doing it. And then I put that out in the world, and then people responded and they're like, you're right. And then they get empowered. And so I feel like some of it is also this morphic field where we don't know, it's not a numbers game. It's not that we need 10 million people doing exactly what we're doing. But the way I see it is we were put here for a purpose and to see this thing. And if the question is, do we make the right choice when we're presented with the choice, and do we act with integrity? And it's this biblical question, right? Are you going to do the right thing when you're presented with something hard? And then you try, knowing that sometimes you're going to not get it right, but you try. And then if enough of us do that, maybe we jump this morphic field. Maybe it's we get several hundreds of people and then it becomes a thing all at once. Like, who's to say that we're not the viral meme of dandelions manifest, It might seem goofy, but like if I have to go up against all these things, I'm going to do it my own way. It seems to resonate with people. I don't know. But do what feels right to you. Some people want to go and they want to create their own community. And I would say, if you do that, great. Don't do it because you're running away, because you can't run away from this thing. If you want to do it because that's how you want to spend your time in a way that feels right to you, then do it for that. Yeah. But I think we shouldn't run. We shouldn't run from a place of fear. We should stand confident as much as we can, because that is unexpected.
I love that. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, that's a great way to end this. I wanted to end it on something like that.
Love wins.
Yeah. Yeah.
Global peace movement against AI.
A global peace movement against AI. Wow.
Yep.
There you go, guys. Make that a hashtag. Make that go viral on social media.
Yeah. Because that's what it is. That's the unifying. That steps outside of all the pandemic narrative. We can just say, you know what, you do you. Let's put that behind us. Let's do this thing together. And that's where we need to be now. Is we need to be together. And that would be unexpected.
Right.
All
that
right.
would throw
I can hear my husband on the steps. So
all right,
night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you, Alison. We appreciate